And I'd like to call the District 204 Committee of the whole meeting to order. Marilyn, can you please call the roll?
Member O'Bear.
Here.
Member Vita Daniels.
Present.
Member Dillon.
Here.
Member Gretsch.
Here.
Member Kelly.
Here.
Member Swinehart.
Here.
Member Thomas.
Here.
Thanks, Marilyn. Next up, we have agenda-related public comments. Marilyn, do we have any agenda-related comments this evening?
We do.
Great. So first, I'd just like to remind everyone that we appreciate your participation this evening, and there are two opportunities for audience members to address the Board of Education. Agenda-related comments are welcome at the beginning, and non-agenda-related comments before we adjourn. We appreciate community participation, but please understand that per board policy, we cannot engage in dialogue or discussion. If there is a specific question or comment that requires follow-up, the appropriate administrator will respond at a later time. And lastly, pursuant to Board Policies 2, 230, and 830, individuals addressing the board are expected to conduct themselves with respect and civility. And in the interest of time, please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Thank you for cooperating with us to make this evening's meeting efficient and productive. Marilyn, if you can call our first speaker.
So I've addressed the board before on similar topics and have made this point in the past. But I think that we can and we should be doing much better as school leaders. And I think that if you want to improve the school culture and the climate here, asking students the following questions is not a way to do that. So taking an exorbitant amount of classroom instruction time and trying to hustle our students into saying something incriminating or simply that's not true is not the practice of good leadership. So please listen on the record to the Panorama survey questions that were given to our students last week. All of these questions ask the kids to pick one of 5 responses: almost never, once in a while, sometimes, frequently, or almost always. Question 33, how often do you spend time at school with students from different races? Question 34, how often do you have classes with students from different races? Question 35, at your school, how often do students from different races hang out with one another? Question 36, at your school, how common is it for students to have close friends from different races? Question 37, how fairly do students at your school treat people from different races? Question 38, how fairly do adults at your school treat people from different races? Question 39, how often do you think about what someone of a different race experiences? Question 40, how confident are you that students at your school can have honest conversations about race? Question 41, at your school, how often are you encouraged to think about race topics? Question 42, how comfortable are you sharing thoughts about race topics with students? Question 43, how often do students at your school have important conversations about race even though they're uncomfortable? There's 2 more. Over 10%. Or, excuse me, I don't know. When there are major news events related to race, how do adults at your school speak about them? Question 45, the last question of a 45-question survey, and I've read 15 of them or so. How well does your school help students speak out against race? 5 answers for the kids. So many of our students have been with their classmates since kindergarten, as you all well know. And these questions make up over a third of your survey, your academic survey during classroom time. So as a reminder, we're not social justice crusaders here. It's a dangerous direction to go. And if you think that you're improving school culture and climate by focusing on student differences like skin color, instead of truly aiming at inclusion for all, I believe you're mistaken. Fitting students into categories and pointing out differences is not healthy for anyone. Thanks for your time.
Marilyn, do we have any other speakers tonight? Thank you. That concludes our agenda-related public comments. Next up, facility items. One item related to facilities And actually, following the description from Brian, his overview tonight, and because of the upcoming due date, we're going to be asking the board to take action on this item this evening. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Brian. Let us know what's going on.
Thank you, President Dillon. I'll be brief with this. This is actually the second time that this board has seen not this particular grant, but the one that we did last year. And it's exactly the same as it was last year. The state of Illinois has, last year and this year, and they've done it prior to that as well, offered the opportunity for school districts to obtain a $50,000 grant that they call the School Maintenance Project Grant. And so $50,000 is the maximum amount that you can obtain. And ultimately, the district also needs to reserve that same dollar amount. It's a matching grant. And you'll note that in my summary here, the executive summary, I have put down that I think that we stand the best chance to obtain a grant looking at our HVAC projects, which is the same we applied for last year under the HVAC projects with the work that's being done across the street here on those air handling units. And so we know that that dollar amount there is about $1 million, so we certainly have plenty of reserved funds from the district to meet that matching part. So really, I've already begun filling out part of the application. All we need the board to do is approve the grant and then the matching funds, the additional $50,000, which again, as I said, we know that we have plenty of money to cover that. And then we will submit that grant to the state of Illinois. I don't think that there's any guarantee that we'll get the grant, but I also do think that we'll most likely receive one. So again, be happy to answer any questions on this information.
Did they announce this late, Brian?
You know what happens is they oftentimes will send these emails out, and it's really kind of strange because I'm the person who's on the grant as far as like the contact person. I never even received an email. So I want to talk with them and kind of find out, hey, why are we getting these things, or why we're not receiving these? You know, certain individuals are, certain individuals aren't. So I want to talk with them about it.
We got it last year, right?
We did, and as you recall, last year, same.
There's a special board meeting today
Yeah.
because it was
Right.
right up against the deadline. So.
Right.
I
same
do
sort
feel
of-
like, yeah, actually, I feel like in the last few years, it's been historically like less.
It has.
So, but, I mean, of course, we want to take advantage of that.
Absolutely. Sure.
Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Brian.
Sure.
Any other questions? No? All right. Julie, you good?
I'm good. That sounds like a good deal for us.
Great. Is there then a motion to approve the school maintenance project grant as presented and discussed?
So moved.
Second.
Ellen, can you please call the roll?
Member O'Hare?
Yes.
Member Rita Daniels? Yes. Member Gretsch?
Yes.
Member Kelly?
Yes.
Member Swinehart?
Yes.
Member Thomas?
Yes.
Member Dillon?
Yes. Thank you. Okay, moving right along to finance. We're going to stick with you, Brian. We're going to begin to discuss the estimated tax levy, please.
All right, thank you again, President Dillon. So, as we've been talking about, the delay in the Cook County property taxes is coming to an end, thankfully. So the good news is that on Friday of last week, I did receive the first and most likely final draft of our 2021 tax levy. So that's good because now I can start to build this coming levy, of course, which is due in December, based on the actual numbers, and then present the board with that information at the November meeting. The unfortunate part about that was getting it on Friday. I've not had an opportunity to do that for this group to see here tonight. It's something that I definitely need to take some time with and make sure that I have all of the right numbers and the right locations. And so I will do that over the next week. And I will, for the board, have at the November, I think, 21st meeting, if I remember correctly, I will have a first look at the actual, recommended tax levy at that point, at which point also the board does need to vote on that and approve what's called the estimated levy. We then have to wait 20 days, which there's plenty of time in between the November meeting and the December meeting. But at the December meeting, we adopt the final tax levy, then we submit it to the Cook County, which is due to the county no later than the last Tuesday in December. That's the deadline to submit it. So we'll have plenty of time to do that. In addition to that, we will, again, I would recommend that we have the Truth and Taxation hearing I guess, actually, this year, we're going to have to do it. We've always done it, even though we haven't had to do it, and that line is a 5% increase. If you ask for a 5% increase in your tax levy, then you're required to have a truth and taxation hearing, so we would do that at the December board meeting. But if you recall from what I had mentioned back in October, we will probably be around a 6 to 7% ask in terms of total increase, because 5% would be attributable to the CPI, which is what essentially caps us and allows us to obtain dollars for, in this case, really, it's inflation, right? When you look at it, we always take the December number of any year of inflation, and inflation in December of 2021, which is the number that we're using here, was 7%. We are capped at 5%. And so that's essentially where the recommendation would be. Plus, we would also be adding a percent or two somewhere in that area for any of the new property that is not currently on the tax rolls. And so we would probably, as I said, be between a 6 to 7% increase in total. Now, only 5% of that would be on existing homeowners, and then the rest would be attributable to new properties that are rolling onto the tax rolls in that 2021 year. I'm sorry, 2022 year. And so, again, I pretty much have just repeated a lot of the information that I had here before. I just kind of wanted to keep it out here just for brief discussion. A couple of the bullet points, as I already talked about, the inflation in December 21, 7%. We're capped at 5%. Again, somewhere between 5 and 7% for the over the 2021 levy will be what we'll most likely be asking for. We've always done the truth and taxation hearing here, even if it wasn't required. If we had a 3% increase, we still did it. This year, we'll have to do it, again, based on the fact that we would be asking for that. 5% increase will bring us about $3.5 million of new money. Again, that's not including any new property dollars, which I will have calculations for that and talk about those with you at the November 21st meeting. And then, as I just talked about, the process for adopting that, we've kind of gone through that. So, again, estimated in November, final in December, and then we have to present that to Cook County no later than that last Tuesday in December. So, again, I apologize for not having all of those actual numbers to you. You will have those in time for the 21st for the board meeting, and I will make sure that I get all of that together. And there'll be probably there's several documents that I have that are involved in that. But we certainly will go over those on the 21st, and I'll be happy to answer any questions about those. But right now, I'd be happy to answer any questions about what we've talked about here tonight.
Brian, I do have a couple questions. I just want to understand that. So we're capped at the 5% for what the property as is right now.
That's right.
But because the CPI is at 7%, what we're doing is with the new property, so depending on how much new property we get.
Right.
So if we have a lot of new property, we won't be taking it as much of a percentage? Why is it between 6 or 7?
Well, typically, if we were to add, let's say, so what I have to do is I have to estimate. So there's still estimating that goes on in this process, but at least with the last year's, I don't have to. So what we'll do is we have to estimate a number for what we think is going to be the new property number, the new property value. And so again, that's the value of any new property that's rolling onto the tax rolls. That does not exist, I guess, today, right? But it does tomorrow. And so 5% of that increase is going to be attributable just to the inflation and to the existing homeowners. Now, on top of that, we are going to add another percent or two to make sure that we capture all of that new property. Because essentially, if you don't capture that new property, you may not be able to get it back ever again. So that's why you add another percent or two on top of that, which is always what we've done. If you look back historically, let's say we had a CPI an inflation CPI, consumer price index number of 1.5%, we would probably ask for 3.
Okay.
Okay?
So we always do this.
We do that.
It's not because we're capped at the 5.
That's right. Yeah. We will not get anything above 5% on existing properties. We could actually go out there and ask for 50%. We're not going to do that. We could. We won't get anything more than 5%. It doesn't matter what that ask is, because 5% we're capped on existing properties. The additional percent or two is going to just be to make sure we cover for those new property dollars that are rolling on. Now, I will tell you this. This is the interesting part about this. There's also a part of the process that we don't control. And that part of the process is the assessment of properties. So, while the district in aggregate asks for a 5% increase, that does not mean that each individual property owner is going to see a 5% increase. If your property is assessed at 15 or 20% higher than what it was the prior year, you may be paying a little bit more. If your property dropped in value, you may be paying a little bit less. So it's truly like the pie chart, right? So there's the total dollar amount and, you know, the pieces of the pie. If one's a little bit smaller, one has to be a little bit larger. But that exists now today. None of that is changing. So kind of a long-winded answer, but hopefully that answers your question.
Is this where, Brian, I remember last year, you, I think it was related to this, shared several different price points for like property values?
Yes.
And so will we get that
You will.
again so we can understand if your home is worth X?
Yes.
This is what you're probably looking at and then on down the line?
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, what I'll do is I take usually about 4 different price points of housing, what we would see for, residential properties in the district. And again, that's all estimated too, right? Because what I'm doing is I'm through the process of the spreadsheets that I work on, I develop what I believe would be something close to what our tax rate would be. Then I plug that into the formula that the county uses to generate tax bills based on, again, estimated property values, that sort of thing. So we'll have a look at that, and we can share that. I'll share that with everybody. Again, we have to keep in mind that those are still all estimated numbers until we get the final product, but we have to turn this in, the levy in, the actual documents, before we have any of those final numbers, so.
Brian, because it's the CPI is so high because inflation and such, we stay close to that CPI, whether it's 2% or 5% or 7%, because that's really what the numbers, what our expenses are going to be getting hit with also. I mean, we're going to that 7% because most of our expenses will follow that
Well, we're going to the 5%.
5%.
Yeah, right.
correct.
We're going to the 5%. And yes, that is correct. Look, here's one of the issues, and that is the district, as far as expense goes, we don't operate in a vacuum. And what I mean by that is if every consumer out there is paying, 6, 8, 10% more for goods and services, so are we. I mean, it isn't as though, if you're paying $4.50 for a gallon of gas, so are we. We're not immune from that. And so, yes, the answer to the question is our expenses are going to rise as well. There are also years, let's keep in mind, there are also years where, the CPI has been, again, the inflation number is 1.4%, and our expenses are going higher than that. So, there are certainly years, the average, since the CPI the tax cap CPI has been in place, the average has been about 2.25%, and that's an average annually. So that's about how much we've been able to raise. And that's, oh gosh, that was 1994, so what is that, 20-some years of data there. 2004, almost 30 years of data, 28 years of data there. So that's kind of the history of that. Yep.
Brian, I had a similar question. I think you pretty much just answered it. There's elements of, I guess, compensation contracts that are different, but I would think in time it kind of all catches up. And to your point, we're capped at 5%, and there will certainly be costs that we incur that are more closely aligned with CPI increases, which are higher. And unfortunately, I don't want to say unfortunately, but it sounds like the statutes are such that we cannot help the school, generate additional revenues to match that. And in those areas, it'll be a little short, but hopefully it won't be that impactful, and we're doing what we can to try to be fiscally appropriate. Is that fair?
I think that's fair. That's right. Absolutely.
Brian, one thing I think I noted too that was in your memo, that the 5% says that the increase allows for an additional $128,780.
No, that's the supplemental levy. That's a different.
Oh.
That's the next item. That's the next agenda item.
Sorry, moving on, then I won't get in there. Then I do have another question when it comes to new property, as far as how we describe what that is.
Yep.
That that's residential only?
No, it's everything.
It is, okay.
Residential,
Wasn't sure.
commercial, industrial, anything that, did not exist in the tax rolls so this is going to be the 2022 tax levy. So anything that
Sure.
was being built in 2021 is then completed in that calendar year of 2021 and now comes onto the tax rolls in 2022. That's what that new property number is made up of.
When, the properties that are adjacent to like 47th and 9th Avenue that were the old Illinois Masonic
Yeah.
property, when did those come onto the tax roll?
So those have rolled on and probably are still in the process. It typically, from my past understanding and experience, it typically takes Cook County about 2 years or so to catch up with all of the new properties. And because remember, there's also a delay too. You're always paying the year in arrears. And so as those are built, I would say the majority of those came on in probably 20 and 21. And if you look back at some of our the numbers that we had, they were between, and don't hold me to this exactly, but for 20 and 21, the new property values were about $35 and $40 million, somewhere in that ballpark. The new document that I have for, did I say 2021? I meant to say 2019 and 20. For 21, we only have $7.7 million of new property. So the majority of those have rolled on at this point.
Yeah, I was, I mean, it does seem like they've become a little more like saturated over there, but I didn't remember seeing those since I've been on the board, so I was thinking that they rolled on before.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just a quick question. So I know that there were some community questions regarding the property tax levy. So did we have a frequently updated section or something that we have on the website that is there so that people can go check and learn more about it?
Yes, we do.
So that was just added. Right?
It was up there. It was up there before. I just recently updated it to reflect a little bit more of the data and information that's current.
It's on the business services section of the website under transparency reports. So that's how you.
That's right.
Do you date that at the bottom when you update it, like a last update it?
We did.
Awesome.
We did update.
Okay, excellent.
So I just, the business services, so I'm looking on here just because this is new to me.
Yeah, if you go,
Services, it might only be me, so.
so go to the About LTHS,
Yes.
go to Administration,
Okay.
and now click on Business Services on the left-hand side.
Okay, just so everybody can hear it,
Yep.
Yeah.
where it's at.
Transparency
That's
reports.
'Cause I was gonna ask you later, so I thought I'd ask you now. Perfect, thanks.
Yep, that's it. Yep,
Okay, perfect. And then there's the tax levy questions and answers on the right under the transparency reports. there.
correct. Yep.
Okay, perfect, thanks.
Have all the historical data here too, which I know people were curious.
Yeah, those are the last 5 years.
Yeah.
So those were the CPI numbers that we levied. Again, which is the cap, right, at the time, because we're either capped at 5, we're capped at the lesser of 5% or what the actual CPI number is in December of any given year. So if you're on this page here and you look at 2017, 2.1% is what we levied because that's what the CPI was that year. We can't get to 5 when it says the lesser of 5 or what the CPI is.
Sure.
So those are the numbers that we had for those years.
And that,
Brian, do we ever, in your memory, have we ever deviated from CPI or the 5% cap? Or have we pretty much used that as our guidepost for setting the levy?
We have always used that for our guidepost, and so that's what we've done.
So nothing, even though the number is actually reaching the cap, and again, as we talked about, costs are going up around us in excess of that 5%, we are staying absolutely consistent with our past practice, from how I would interpret that.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
and Brian, just to piggyback onto that, would there be risks associated with us not? I mean, it's back to, I think, what you said, not being able to capture those dollars, and that would eventually, how does that would affect our budgets maybe over the long haul?
Yeah, so let me give you the brief answer to that question. So, no, that's fine. And if I had answered this question for you last year, I would tell you you can never recapture any of those dollars, okay? So this year, the state passed some legislation that says, hey, look, if you don't levy the maximum amount, you may be able to recapture some of those dollars. And I say may because you're still capped at 5%, right? And so there's a couple of issues with that. If you said, well, look, we're only going to take 2.5% this year, and then we're going to defer 2.5% to next year, and next year it's 4.5 or it's 4.5%, you can't get 2.5% back, right? That can't happen. So now you have this dollar amount out there and they say, well, you may be able to recapture that over 3 years, okay, is kind of what I've heard from some of the law firms. Then the other issue is, let's say 2 years from now or 3 years from now, you end up with a CPI that is 1%, 1.5%. And the reason the CPI is going to be 1.5% is because things are slowing way down, the economy's slowing. And then the question becomes, well, if we're going to add that 2.5% back in, now we're probably in a time period where the economy is slowed, things aren't as great. Now we're coming back with like a 4% increase. So there's a lot of things to consider with that. And again, here we are staying true to what we've always done. And look, quite honestly, if you don't recapture, if you don't take those dollars when they're available, like I said, you may have an opportunity to recapture it. But immediately in your budgets, you're certainly losing those dollars. They're not coming in. And that's just, essentially the board has said, look, we would defer those maybe or give them up forever. And if you end up giving them up forever, you can never get them back. So there is and again, hopefully I'm being clear on the change in the law and what's going on, because I don't want anybody to think that it used to be that you couldn't do anything about it. Now you might be able to. But there are still risks involved with that, if that makes sense.
One other question, obviously our voting on this has no impact on the feeder schools. They have their own tax levy discussions that they.
That's correct. Every taxing body that exists has their own levy. So us, any of our feeder districts, park district, library, fire protection districts, they all have their own levy, and their respective boards vote on their levy. And when you get your tax bill, when you see all of the individual taxing bodies itemized on there, each one of those groups has their own tax levy, and that's how they generated their tax rate on your bill, which then, of course, is aggregated into one total tax rate that's applied against the value of your home. And then they say less any deductions you may have, that's how much you owe. Sure.
Anybody else? All righty.
We'll have like I said, on the 21st, I will have all of the actual documentation for you, and we'll look at that real levy, I guess, if you will, and we will need the board to vote on that as that estimated levy on the 21st.
Great, moving on then, which I was getting ahead of anyway. The next item under finance is the resolution authorizing a supplemental tax levy to pay the principal of interest on outstanding limited bonds of the district for a first reading.
Thank you, President Dillon. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
a long,
So break it down for us,
long
please.
recommendation there for you. Yeah. So again, I'll be brief on this one. Again, this has been going on since 2009, and let me just give you a little background. One of the accounts that we levy for, and you'll see this on our documents, is the bond and interest fund. The bond and interest fund is really simply a clearing account, and what I mean by that is there's a levy that's applied based on how much based on what we call our debt service extension base, and for us it's about $2.5 million. And so what ultimately ends up happening is those dollars that are levied and go into that bond and interest fund go in there specifically and only for the purpose of paying our debt obligations back. So the bonds that we have, paying those debt obligations back. Nothing else happens in that account. You can't pay for anything else out of there, salaries, none of that. It's just the in and the out. And so prior to 2009, again, with the tax caps in place, you could not increase the limit in there. So if you had a debt service extension base of $2 million, you could never increase it. It was $2 million, and it was that forever. In 2009, the Local Government Debt Reform Act for the state of Illinois said you actually can start to increase those, and you increase those by the same percent that you would be increasing, or up to the same percent that you would be increasing your regular tax levy, okay? So essentially, they said, yep, you can do that, but now you have to take a separate resolution on this particular increase. Otherwise, they would leave it right where it is. And again, in that example I gave, if it was $2 million, you didn't take this, they'd leave it at $2 million. You can always increase it in a future year, but nonetheless, when the district sold bonds in 2013 and 14, the plan was to increase it each year by the CPI going forward because they had that ability to do that. And so, again, as I mentioned, if you look for tax year 2021, our bond and interest fund levy was $2,575,000. And so, again, increasing that by that 5%, that brings that up. Then here's our number, the $128,780 additional to that particular levy, and would bring that levy to $2,704,385 for the 2022 tax year. And again, this was, again, when we sold those bonds in 13 and 14, the district had figured in that they would add this increase, going forward. This doesn't need anything more than one approval by the board. So typically I show this to the board here in November as a first read, first look. We'll bring it back to the December committee of the whole. Nothing will change for the second look. And then you usually have that approved in December. Technically, the due date for this isn't until like February. I don't bother with that. When I'm turning in the regular levy, I also turn this one in, and we're done because there's really no reason to wait until February to do it. So we're talking about it now. This is the time to do it, get it done. And so we would turn that in at the same time. So I'll be happy to answer any questions about that one.
Ready? All right. I think that's it. Thanks
Okay.
for being so thorough, Brian.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Sure, you're welcome.
All right. Next up, we have Human Resources, and we have one agenda item under Human Resources, and that is the Stipend Committee recommendations. Ed Piotrowski.
Thank you, President Dillon. This year, in October, we had our first meeting of the Stipend Committee, and at this time, we are bringing forward recommendations for stipends that have, or for clubs, activities, and athletics that have stipends associated with them. One recommendation is for a club that is currently on pilot status, that we are recommending to move to a full club status with associated stipend. We have two recommendations associated with existing clubs that we are looking to increase the stipend for additional adult supervision, additional adult assistance. And then we have two athletic teams, athletic programs that we are making a recommendation for additional stipends based on increased student involvement, those being competitive cheer and girls wrestling. Starting with the first program that is currently in the pilot status, that is Older Adult Connections. Older Adult Connections is a club, as I mentioned, that began during the 21-22 school year, at the beginning of the school year, in pilot status, and has worked in a very unique way, given the nature of the club. This is a club that partners with local senior citizen organizations, namely Plymouth Place, Bethlehem Woods, Old Aging Care Connections, to name a few. And obviously during the pandemic, health and safety was at the forefront of everyone's mind. So while other clubs had moved more to traditional meetings, given the nature of the club, there were still some unique and virtual ways to partner with the programs, but or with the different organizations. But this is a club that has a very healthy student enrollment, so much so that the students keep coming up with different ideas to partner with local senior citizens in the area, and work within existing LTE programs, namely our jazz band concert, inviting senior citizens in, where they've partnered up with our LT students in OAC. They've also hosted trivia nights at Plymouth Place, doing things where they're making cards with senior citizens, delivering flowers and things along those lines. It has had a healthy enrollment throughout the pilot year, and at this point, the Stipend Committee is recommending moving forward with the 2.64% stipend, which means they would essentially meet as a club one time per week for the remainder of the school year and moving forward. Moving into the two clubs that already exist that we are looking for stipend increases for. One is Pinball Club. Pinball Club is a club that began within the past couple of years and began as just that, as a way for students to gather in the corral to play pinball with similar interests. We also have a ping pong club that meets around the same time with many of the same students. Over the time that Pinball Club has met, it has grown not only in the number of students who have participated, but in the scope of what is being offered. Initially, a lot of the weekly tournaments or the tournaments that were being held were just among students that were coming and being part of Pinball Club. That has expanded, and that has expanded pretty significantly to include monthly international tournaments through the International Flipper Pinball Association, which is a very large pinball association. And one of the things that the club is very proud of is that given the nature of the events and where the events are typically held, they're typically held in establishments that have age requirements because they're in bars and restaurants. LT, we believe, is either the first or one of very few high schools in the country to be able to host these events, to be able to have our students compete against internationally ranked pinball players. And we were very fortunate and very excited that one of our students actually took first place in our second International Pinball Association event. With the expansion of the program, not only with students but in the scope, we are making this request for an additional advisor to help students in the coaching of playing pinball, but as well as the setup and the tear down, the weekly rentals for the different equipment. There's a lot of behind the scene logistics that goes on. So at this time, the stipend committee received a recommendation, and we are forwarding the recommendation with our support for an additional club sponsor. Again, at the same 2.64% stipend that Older Adult Connections had, essentially meeting one time per week and moving forward. Yoga and Wellness Club is very similar. Yoga and Wellness Club is in its third year within the school district's co-curricular offerings. Currently, the club has 48 active members, but we can tell through our curricular offerings by offering a yoga track through PE, that is something that has grown very significantly. We are looking to expand that program from the curricular level as well as in the co-curricular level. By offering dance fitness over at South Campus, we are anticipating more and more students will avail themselves of a yoga and wellness club because there are a lot of tie-ins and connections between yoga and dance. The club is also looking to expand its offerings not only at North Campus, where it's primarily housed, but at South Campus as well, to capture the students who are participating in dance fitness over there. With the increase in number of students comes an added requirement of safety and supervision. While many people may think of yoga as simply stretching, that's not the case. There are certainly complex and moves which can be dangerous if not performed properly. So it's important to have additional people who are on site to be able to monitor students, to properly spot students, supervise students. But we are excited about the growth and expansion of this program. The club itself made a request for an additional sponsor to assist in its growth, and the stipend committee reviewed this and feel strongly about it and support that request. Again, this is also a 2.64% stipend, recognizing that the Yoga and Wellness Club does meet one time per week, 1 hour. We then, shifting over to athletics, we do have requests for additional stipends for 2 athletic programs, both due to expansion and growth of the program. You may remember many years ago, we began offering competitive cheer as a co-curricular offering here at Lyons Township High School. And at the time, we approved 1 level of competitive cheer. We've essentially had a varsity level of competitive cheer. And over that time, the number of students who have been interested in competitive cheer has grown. We've had to make cuts each and every year, and what we find are those cuts have typically been for students who are looking to get into competitive cheer, may not have had cheer backgrounds in the past. As we have grown, other programs in the area have also grown, and now we're starting to see other programs also have lower levels. We would like to expand our offerings to include a junior varsity level as well. this request reflects that. We would like to add 2 coaches to essentially create a coaching tree that would have varsity coaches as well as assistant coaches in the program, which would be responsible for junior varsity competitive cheer. This would allow more students who are interested in participating in competitive cheer to be part of that team, to allow them to learn more of those skills at an earlier age, earlier experience in the program, so that as they grow through the program, by the time they get to that varsity level, they have grown within learning the skills of competitive cheer. They have built that camaraderie as a team, and really strengthens our program. The more students we can get in the program from a younger age, from earlier in high school, strengthens that program all the way through. This is something, like I said, initially it did not have that junior varsity level. We feel now is the time to do that based on the increased student interest and the number of students who have actually gone out for competitive cheer. So we are looking to make that recommendation. These coaches, these stipend percentages are more significant than a club because they do meet on a much more frequent basis than once per week. These are 14% stipends. The amount of stipend is based on the length of the competitive year that they might have. That's why you see a little bit of difference between different seasons or different sports. And then finally, the last recommendation that we are making is for girls wrestling. What we are making a recommendation for is to add another coach to our wrestling program, with the sole purpose or with the goal in mind that coach would be responsible for coaching girls wrestling. Currently, we have 17 students that have expressed interest in participating in the girls wrestling team. Today was the first day for winter sports, and I happened to walk past the wrestling gym and saw very many students, including the 17 girls that were interested in as well. So I know that this is something that many schools have started to do. Girls wrestling is one of the fastest growing sports in the state and in the country. There are currently 4 other schools in the West Suburban Conference that have a girls wrestling program. By us expanding it, provides more opportunities for students to compete against their peers. If we left the same number of coaches within the wrestling program, what we would find is that we would not have enough coaches to the teams to be able to travel with teams for events, for practices, things along those lines. We would like to add an additional coach on the wrestling program to assist or to essentially be the girls wrestling head coach. That would allow them to have separate meets, separate tournaments, and participate and compete against other schools. Because of the length of the season, the number of practices involved, this is a slightly greater stipend percentage than competitive cheer. This is 14.4% as opposed to 14, because they're generally the same length, just a little bit longer for the winter season than the competitive cheer season. Those are the recommendations that we have for stipends for the stipend committee. I'm happy to answer any questions if the board has any.
Ed, the coaches on the wrestling, when you're talking about the 5 levels, that's for the boys wrestling?
Correct.
So this would be their own.
This would be a separate
wrestling.
branch of the wrestling program. We envision that it would grow very similarly to how girls lacrosse grew. Girls lacrosse started out as an IHSA club sport and essentially grew to an IHSA recognized sport based on the number of the number of schools that participated. We are seeing that increase in girls wrestling. We would begin with 1 level essentially, and as the number of students who are interested in participating continues to grow, as the number of teams within the state continues to grow, we fully expect this to grow, and we may be coming back to the Board of Education with additional requests to round out the coaching tree for girls wrestling specific, eventually at a point where it might just completely separate from boys wrestling.
It used to be 60 was the number that the IHSA, do you know this, Jen? It used to be 160 schools have it. It moves from an emerging sport to a state series sport. So.
How many students can you have per sponsor? I mean, like if like yoga, something like that. Do you have like 300 students with 1 sponsor? To limit the club.
It is based on the nature of the club. If we have a club that is very, I'm going to use the term educational. I don't mean it in any sort of negative way, but if there aren't if there's not a physical aspect, if there's not a safety or a supervision aspect, we could have more students that would be working with one sponsor. If the club is based on discussion or something. If we're talking something like rock climbing or something like wrestling, like yoga, where there are inherent dangers that could be, we want to take that into account. We don't have a hard and fast number, but what we want to be sure is that the club has enough sponsorship or coaches to be able to adequately and safely supervise.
So are the
everyone.
clubs currently now being limited?
No, but what they might not have all people participate at the same time.
Got
We've
it.
had to limit it for things like art club in the past because there was a safety and supervision if students are doing things like in jewelry and metalsmithing, or if they're in multiple rooms where they've had to limit the number of students who could participate on a given day. That would be the same for something like yoga and wellness if we weren't able to expand it.
And who makes that determination?
That's something that the club sponsors work with Peter Geddes, our Director of Student Activities. And then when we have the conversations at the stipend committee, those are questions that we ask at that stipend committee to say, is this something that truly needs another coach? Is it nice to have another coach, or is it a need because of safety or supervision?
And then this is maybe the most basic question that I can ask. But what is the stipend base? Like, what number are you going off of the base of stipend?
The percentage amount?
Right, well, you're determining the percentage
Mhm.
amount based upon the time commitment.
Yes.
But how are you coming up with the dollar amount based upon the stipend?
The dollar amounts are established in the negotiated agreement. We have an appendix within the negotiated agreement.
Okay, and then that's like the set amount and then that percentage?
Correct.
Okay,
That is
I
correct.
totally missed that one.
That's okay. It's Appendix B of the negotiated agreement if you are looking at the negotiated agreement.
I was
Based
just
on the
curious.
base
I had a
salary,
visual when you said
percentage
that. I was
based
like,
on
the
the base
index,
salary.
yeah. Okay, so it's based upon, but it's not based upon the teacher's salary.
No, there's a separate
Separate
salary
rider
schedule
for it.
within the
Got it.
appendix.
Okay,
correct.
that's what I wanted to make sure, okay.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, it's not 14.4% of that person's current teaching salary. It's based on a
So it's the
stipend.
same regardless of who that teacher is.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. The only time that it could be different is if that person has been in that role for more than 5 years, then they move to a separate tier within.
Got it, within that. Okay.
Correct.
Perfect, okay. Thank you.
So for yoga, just a quick question. So it says that they're currently working with existing LTHS sports programs.
Mhm.
So which programs?
Don't know off the top of my head, but I could find out. I know that they've worked within athletics to help provide some sort of, not necessarily rehab, because we have athletic trainers that provide that, but additional stretching and maintenance type techniques to work with those teams to be able to assist with it. Yes. And provide some off-season conditioning as well for students who may be out of their season but want to continue to stay in shape and learn some flexibility.
And Ed, when we get these requests at the stipend level, is there usually somebody is it hard to fill or find somebody to take on this additional staff or request, or is it there's somebody maybe in mind that they kind of think they may already have?
If they are ones moving from a pilot status to a full status, generally not, because we already have an advisor who's been working at that pilot status. If it is something that is moving, from one sponsor to two, generally there will be people who have been interested in that program or might be volunteering. It's not uncommon to have staff volunteer in programs. And then if there is a position open up, whether it's through expansion or through attrition, those people would move in. There is always that risk, but we're confident that we would be able to do that. Within wrestling, we do have coaches on the team that would be interested in moving into that role. Same thing with competitive cheer as well.
So with approval, if the board were to approve something like this, it would be something that would go into effect immediately, like for this winter season?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Absolutely.
Ed, I just had, first of all, I love all of these, and, I think it's amazing to continue to hear all the opportunities that our students have here to do outside of the academic program. It's fantastic and such an important part of the experience. I remember when we talked about stipends last year, as a process, it sounded I just was hoping you could refresh me. Stipend committee meets a couple of years? a couple of times per year?
Correct. We meet once per quarter.
Once per quarter?
Minimally once per quarter, yes.
And so I was looking at last year's notes, and I noticed that Pinball Club was one that was in pilot status last year, so when we discussed these in June, we had approved it and so forth. and I recall you saying that most of the programs go in pilot status for about a year.
Yes.
And so is this the first meeting of the stipend committee?
This is the first meeting of the stipend committee, correct?
And are all the programs that started as a pilot last year, are they all reviewed?
No, so what happens is after, when a club is in a pilot status, then if there is healthy enrollment, if they're wishing for it to continue, then they make that recommendation to, or not the recommendation, they make a request to the stipend committee to attach a formal proposal. Sometimes that pilot status can go a little bit longer given circumstances. So during the pandemic, we had some clubs that were in pilot status for more than a year because they were unable to meet given the nature of their club. But generally, it's minimally a school year. Sometimes it might be a little bit longer.
Okay, so it's probably foreseeable that we'll be approving other stipends along the year of programs that were being piloted next year. That
It
just
very
haven't-
well could be. Not all clubs that go into pilot status make it out into a full recommendation. The approval at pilot status is based on student interest in the club, the club meeting the requirements of what we would approve. But then once it's in pilot status, that's where there needs to show consistent enrollment, healthy enrollment, meetings that meet what that initial stipend proposal was. If it's meeting just for the sake of meeting, but there's not really a lot going on, there's two things that are going to happen. That's not really following what that request was, and you're not going to see steady enrollment in that, or steady participation. So we may see a club that's in pilot status that only has 5 or 6 students throughout the whole year and just hasn't met that threshold or that number that we would like to see to grant full status. At that time, we would either say, okay, it didn't pan out into full status, or we would work with them and say, we're not going to deny that club to be a stipend, but we are not going to approve it at this time. Here are the things that we would like to see you work on. And those are conversations that the Director of Student Activities has with that club. That club, whether it's that pilot club sponsor or the students who have initially proposed that club. Yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Anything else? Awesome, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Back to the 21st on the
Yes.
correction. Yeah.
Okay, next up, we have a very detailed presentation of under curriculum and instruction. I think I will kick this over to Dr. Waterman to get us started on this discussion.
Yeah, thank you, President Dillon. So as the board probably gathered from the packet of materials that was sent last week, have an important presentation to share tonight. Really comprises of 5 main components, 3 of which are data reports that we traditionally share with the board. Those include the standardized assessment report, the advanced placement report, and the Illinois School Report Card update. The standardized assessment report includes the PSAT 8 and 9, the PSAT 10, the SAT, the Illinois Science Assessment, and then new on this year's report is the dynamic learning maps, alternate assessment, and the access for English learners assessment as well. The advanced placement report includes participation and passing score statistics, and the Illinois School Report Card update includes information about the academic, school quality, and student success indicators that make up a school summative designation rating. And then also new on this year's report is the equity journey continuum, and we're going to share information related to that, which will serve as sort of a reminder from what Dr. Rowe presented back in September already on the equity journey continuum. And then we're going to end this night with a strategic plan goal 1 update. And our goal with that is pretty simple. Now that we share all of this data and information, we want to talk about the work that's happening that will allow our students to continue to grow academically, and how we're both, addressing the highlights, but addressing our areas of focus and areas of concern as well in the data. So we're going to get to that in a bit, but for now, I want to pause and welcome. We have a whole team that's going to be presenting. We have Christine Zeman, Coordinator of Assessment and Research, who's going to talk about the standardized assessment and AP report. Scott is going to share the Illinois School Report Card update. Dr. Rowe will share the equity journey continuum information. And then we have a couple of guests that are sitting back here in the front row that are going to work with Scott. We have Virginia Condon and Kirsten Bacon, our 2 instructional coaches extraordinaire who do amazing work with our teachers and staff. And those 2 and Scott are going to talk about our curriculum review process that we've kicked off this summer. So With that, I'm going to turn it over to Christine to start with the standardized assessment report, but give me 1 second so we can turn on the, I think, Scott, are you driving? Okay. Isn't it? I think it's pretty centered.
Good evening. Thank you for inviting me to speak with you today. The Central Leadership Team is proud of the work our staff does daily to support student learning at LTHS. There are many accomplishments to be proud of while acknowledging we still have work to do in order to support the academic growth of all students. The 2022 Assessment and Report Card Summary will highlight many of the celebrations and identify key opportunities for growth. This summary will be followed by a Strategic Plan Goal 1 update as the action steps highlighted in Goal 1 align directly to supporting academic growth at LTHS. In this presentation, we will review standardized assessment results and advanced placement data from the 2021-2022 school year. Additionally, we will understand how the standardized assessment data is used in conjunction with multiple other measures from the Illinois State Board of Education School Report Card to assign each school a summative designation. New this year, ISB has released an Equity Journey Continuum to help schools identify areas of strength and opportunities for growth utilizing an equity mindset. This continuum supports the work LTHS is committed to doing through the strategic plan and our equity mission statement. Each spring, students in the state of Illinois are required to take a variety of state accountability assessments. Reading and mathematics achievement are assessed through the SAT suite of assessments. All juniors also complete the Illinois Science Assessment, which measures science achievement. Students with severe cognitive disabilities take the Dynamic Learning Maps alternate assessment instead of the SAT suite of assessments and the Illinois Science Assessment. Students who qualify for English Learner Services and Supports also complete an English Language Proficiency Assessment called Access for ELLs. ISB requires schools assess 95% of students in English Language Arts, Mathematics, and Science each year. Lyons Township High School met those participation requirements for the 2021-2022 school year. The SAT suite of assessments includes the PSAT 8-9, PSAT NMSQT, PSAT 10, and the SAT. For state accountability, in the spring of 9th grade, students complete the PSAT 8-9. Students in 10th grade are assessed with the PSAT 10 during the spring of their sophomore year. Juniors complete the SAT during the spring of their junior year. The SAT is a graduation requirement in the state of Illinois, so students who do not complete the assessment during 11th grade will need to take the assessment during the spring of their senior year. The SAT suite of assessments is vertically aligned, allowing educators to collect baseline data, check in and measure progress, and assess student readiness for post-secondary success. College Board considers students college and career ready when SAT section scores meet mathematics and evidence-based reading and writing benchmarks. College Board defines college and career ready as the following. Students with a 75% chance of earning at least a C in first semester credit-bearing college courses in algebra, statistics, pre-calculus or calculus for mathematics, and history, literature, social sciences, or writing classes for evidence-based reading and writing. The chart on this slide illustrates the percentage of students meeting College Board's college and career benchmarks in evidence-based reading and writing, as well as mathematics during the spring of 2022. All three SAT assessments, the PSAT 8-9, PSAT 10, and SAT, are depicted side by side. Performance in both subject areas was strongest on the PSAT 8-9 or the freshman level. College Board has one set of benchmarks that measure a student's likelihood of achieving a C or higher in a college level course. For accountability purposes, the state of Illinois has their own performance standards to measure student achievement on the spring SAT. These performance levels measure a student's mastery of the Illinois learning standards. The 4 performance standards help educators understand if a student has partially met, approached, met or exceeded the content standards for English language arts and mathematics set forth by the State Board of Education. The College Board benchmarks and Illinois performance levels utilize the same assessment data to tell two different stories. And as such, the cut scores associated with proficiency are different depending on the benchmark or performance levels you are utilizing. This chart demonstrates the percentage of students in each of the 4 Illinois performance levels in both evidence-based reading and writing and mathematics. Evidence-based reading and writing has the largest percentage of students in Level 2, approaching standards, while mathematics has the largest percentage of students in Level 3, met standards. This chart also depicts the Illinois performance levels. Each bar represents the percentage of students meeting proficiency, earning a Level 3 or 4, on the evidence-based reading and writing portion of the SAT over the last 5 years. The bars on the left represent LT's student performance. The second set of bars represents performance at the state level. LT continues to outperform the state of Illinois. Both LT and the state have experienced drops in English language arts proficiency. The slight drop in ELA performance is being looked at by curriculum teams and administration to ensure a rigorous ELA curriculum is presented at all grade levels. This chart represents the percentage of students at LT and at the state who met proficiency expectations on the mathematics portion of the SAT. Students at LT outperform their peers across the state. Research suggests that mathematics instruction was impacted more by the COVID-19 pandemic, accounting for the drop in proficiency from the spring of 2019 to the spring of 2021. LT's proficiency percentage increased in the spring of 2022, suggesting that students' mathematical knowledge is recovering from the pandemic. It is important to recognize that mastery of content and proficiency percentages vary amongst student groups. This chart shows the percentage of students proficient, that's earning a Level 3 or 4, on the spring SAT by student group. The light bar represents English language arts proficiency, and the darker bar represents mathematics proficiency. Performance varies greatly across student groups, with traditionally under-supported groups performing lower than their traditionally supported peers. The district's efforts to close these gaps will be shared through the upcoming strategic plan updates. The Illinois Science Assessment, ISA, is the state science assessment for students in grade 11. The ISA is a general science assessment that covers life science, physical science, and earth and space science. Engineering and technology practices are embedded throughout the assessment. The ISA underwent a redesign in 2020, making it impossible to compare 2022 data to prior years. This chart shows the percentage of students proficient, that's earning a Level 3 or 4, on the spring 2022 ISA. The first bar represents the overall science proficiency level for all students at Lyons Township High School. Subsequent bars illustrate the proficiency percentages of various student groups. Hispanic Latinx, Black African American, students receiving English learner or special education services, and economically disadvantaged students had lower proficiency percentages than the overall student group. The Dynamic Learning Maps Alternate Assessment, or DLMAA, is administered in place of the PSAT-SAT to students with the most significant cognitive disabilities, typically associated with an IQ less than 55. Students participating in the DLMAA also have deficiencies in communication, self-care, home living, social interpersonal skills, use of community resources, self-directions, functional academic skills, work leisure, health, and safety. Students in grades 9, 10, and 11 are assessed in English language arts and mathematics. Students in grade 11 also complete the science portion of the DLMAA instead of the Illinois Science Assessment. Less than 1% of students at Lyons Township High School meet the qualifications to participate in the DLMAA. State guidelines do not permit the reporting of assessment data for student groups less than 10. This is designed to protect student privacy. In compliance with these guidelines, LT cannot publicly report DLMAA data. Administration and school staff continue to utilize DLMAA data to inform instruction and program placement, as well as to support the academic needs of all students. Access for English language learners is an English language proficiency exam administered to all English learners. The assessment assesses listening, speaking, reading, and writing. Students receive a score in each domain, as well as an overall composite score. Access has 6 proficiency levels. The chart on this slide illustrates the percentage of English learners at LT that reached levels 5 and 6 each year for the last 5 years. The second set of bars shows the same percentage at the state level. LT performs comparable to the state of Illinois and continues to strengthen supports in place for students learning the English language. Once a student scores a 4.8 composite score on Access, they exit the English Learner Program. LT had an EL exit rate of 5.3% after the 2022 school year. This is slightly lower than the state EL exit rate of 6.1%. LT students, staff, and community members have many reasons to be proud. This slide highlights a few celebrations based on the standardized assessment data presented this evening. Most notably, over 75% of students in the classes of 2024 and 2025 met College Board readiness benchmarks in ELA. 2% more of LT students who completed the Spring 2022 SAT met Illinois mathematics proficiency standards than in the spring of 2021. The percentage of students earning a level 5 or 6 score on Access for ELLs also increased from 2021 to 2022. And approximately 3/4 of LT juniors met science proficiency standards on the Illinois Science Assessment. While LT continues to outperform the state of Illinois, we have many achievement gaps in standardized assessment data, and as a school community, we must continue to find ways to close those gaps. Evidence-based reading and writing performance has also declined over the last 5 years and is an area curriculum teams and administration continue to monitor. Lastly, Access proficiency percentages increased in the spring of 2022 but remain low. The next section of this report looks at participation in advanced placement, AP exams, as well as passing statistics amongst students who sat for AP assessments. The number of students who took at least one AP test reached a new high during the spring of 2022. Not only are more students taking at least one AP exam, but 81% of the students who completed at least one AP exam received a score high enough for credit at any public in-state university. More students are being challenged with AP curriculum, and students are mastering the AP content as demonstrated by their high test scores.
You say that again, I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Sure. So the number of students who took at least one AP test reached a new high during the spring of 2022. Not only are more students taking at least one AP exam, but 81% of the students who completed at least one AP exam received a score high enough for credit at any public in-state university. More students are being challenged with AP curriculum, and students are mastering the AP content as demonstrated by their high test scores. While the number of students taking AP exams has increased, the number of total exams administered is decreasing. This does not mean that less students are earning college credit. Instead, LT has explored multiple pathways for earning college credit, and students are taking advantage of some other paths that do not necessarily include an AP exam. For example, many students participate in dual credit Spanish instead of sitting for the Spanish language and culture AP exam. Within the exams LT does administer, disparities exist among student groups. 9% of exams were administered to Hispanic Latinx students, 3% to Asian students, 1% to Black African American students, 80% to white students, and 4% to students identifying as 2 or more races. This access to valuable AP coursework is being addressed through the action planning teams and the strategic plan. This chart looks at the percentage of exams earning a passing score, which is a 3 or higher, on each AP exam administered. Out of the 2,235 exams administered in the spring of 2022, 78% of all exams resulted in a score of 3 or higher. This data is also broken out by student group and is illustrated by the blue bars in this chart. The high passing rate suggests once students engage in AP content, they are appropriately supported and ultimately very successful. LT has been committed to increasing the participation from under-supported groups in AP courses. This data suggests these initiatives are beginning to work as more students are taking one or more exam. Not only are more students being challenged with the coursework, they are being successful as the percentage of passing scores remains high, with over 3/4 of tests earning a 3 or higher. While more students are engaging in AP exams, there are still discrepancies by student groups. The percentage of exams administered to each student group should mirror the student demographic data. We are getting closer to this and will continue to close these gaps with our strategic plan work. Assessment data is one measure of a school's success, and as such, ISB releases a school report card each year that contains numerous other metrics. Mr. Eggerding will now walk through a high-level overview of the school report card.
All right, so as you can see on the slide here, these are a number of the things you can find on the school report card. Not only a snapshot about the school and also the district, student academic progress, which can be broken down in a number of different ways, our school environment, students, information, including their attendance and other components, accountability for the district and the schools, information about teachers, administrators, our own school highlights that we have a chance to put in there, and equity journey continuum. So I'm going to hop out of this real quick and just kind of show you. As you go into the ISB site, you can click on Illinois Interactive Report Card. And depending on how you search for LT, you might end up with the district report. This is the district report card. You'll know it's the district because it has the superintendent listed first. Sometimes they're a little confusing because they look very similar. You have that district snapshot of one school with a 95% graduation rate, a 4% student mobility rate, a summative designation of one commendable school in that district. I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. Our average spending per pupil in the district, $20,000. The total district expenditures there as well. The evidence-based funding, and Brian's talked about this a lot. Here's a way that they show it as far as adequacy they say we're at 123% of adequacy. Our chronic absenteeism at 28% and our retention at 97%. So that's the snapshot piece. On the left side, you can see these areas that you can then click through. So if you were to click into academic progress, you can then get into those tests we talked about, the SAT, BLM, science assessment. We can look at achievement gap information, college and career ready, career and tech ed, graduation rate. There's really quite a bit of information. You can also then choose to build your own report card and choose just the things you want to look at. And then you can also choose to compare to another school. So that's another tool that a number of schools do. That's more on the school side. So when you go to the school side, you'll notice the difference. The principal's name is first. The color is a little bit different, but I wouldn't be surprised if you couldn't tell the difference. So depending on how you search for it, I just recommend that you double check that. This does talk about our summit designation as being a commendable school, our graduation rate, mobility. It does say the ratings of our what they call feeder schools. All of our feeder schools are commended as well. The school finances and evidence-based funding, absentee and retention. Since we happen to be a single school district, these report cards are fairly similar, but you'll notice that the navigation on the left is in a different order. I have no idea why, but it is. But here you can see that you can compare schools. You can choose another school to compare the same data against. So it's a tool that you can spend hours in. But really, you get to see some information that wouldn't necessarily be done on a presentation. There's information for teacher education. 85% have a master's degree or higher. We have a 17.1 student-teacher ratio with 254 teachers. The only thing you have to understand with the Illinois School Report Card is they have very specific definitions of things. For example, you may be surprised that seems like a low number for teachers. Counselors don't count as teachers. Other folks don't count as teachers that we would consider to be certified staff. So those are just some of the highlights. You can spend, like I said, just hours on looking at the data and comparing as many different things as you'd like. The only other pieces you can do, you can look at previous years as well. Again, with the pandemic, that certainly hampered some of the look backs, as you saw from our data earlier. What you noticed was we mentioned the summative designation. We did receive a commendable summative designation. The way the state determines the summative designation of a school, there are 4 areas. The first hurdle is one that is a relatively low hurdle. You have to have a graduation rate above 67%. You notice ours was in the 90s. So we cleared that hurdle. In order to be commendable, you cannot have an underperforming student group, and so that's sort of the next big hurdle. So underperforming groups based on the way other schools are measured. It's also comparable. We'll get that in a second. And then to be exemplary, you have to be in the top 10%. What it means is there's no set criteria for being exemplary. Every year they add up all the criteria and then go down to the 10% and draw a line. So it's sort of a moving target. But it also takes into account that each group of students is different. So one year the tests may result one way, the next year another way, so there's some of that. So that's where you get sort of the definitions of how they get to that. The way they build up the rating has to do with these academic indicators and school quality and student success indicators. So as all those points that get put in and then ranked to get those designations, 3/4 of your points come from 5 areas. And you'll notice the largest is your graduation rate. That is half of your designation. So when we target things, one of the things we want to make sure, we want to get the most points. We want all kids to do well, but you also want to get the most points. So you want to make sure you're improving your graduation rate. The English language arts proficiency and math proficiency that you saw from Ms. Zeman's presentation, you'll notice that they use the Illinois State benchmark. So those are a little more stringent, a little higher threshold to achieve. And so that's, again, where the 7.5 is for 1 and 2. And then the English learner progress to proficiency. So that's the percentage of those English learners who take that access test, pass, and move on to the program. Right? So that's also, for us, it's a relatively small number of students, but it's worth 5%. So it's a pretty significant area that we need to focus on. The other quarter, the gold segments here, have to do with chronic absenteeism. That's worth 10%. We've noted our chronic absenteeism was over 20%. That's an area we targeted, and you've heard Dr. Terrell talk about that, in particular, how we've been focusing on that this year. The climate survey is based entirely on the percentage of students who take it. So we count kids for weeks to finish that survey because it is a portion of our graduation, or of our designation measure. And then the 9th graders on track to graduate, which is whether or not students are passing their core classes freshman year. All those get added together to get those points, and from that we are ranked and then given our designations. The science proficiency is in there as well. I did overlook that one. It used to be based on performance. Because of the pandemic, it was based on participation. Did your students take the test or not? So we made sure everybody took the test. So as you can see, with these the data that came from Ms. Zeman's presentation, the ELA proficiency was 49.1%, math proficiency 52.8%, science 100, graduation rate 95.25%, and English learner progress to proficiency was 39.4%. So none of those were, as it said here, an underperforming student group, and so that led to that 75%. The other 25% is school quality and success indicators, 28% chronic absenteeism, 93.3% completion of the climate survey by the students, and 97% of our students on track with no more than one F in a core academic course on that freshman year. So that all added all up, that placed us in the commendable range. You'll notice on the district side, it did include the information on the equity journey continuum, and Dr. Rowe will share with us what that all means.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Eggerdine. The Equity Journey Continuum is new to the Illinois State Report Card, which was already shared with you all, and it uses data districts already submit to help schools view their data from an equity lens. The goal of the Equity Journey Continuum is to identify gaps in student achievement, identify opportunities for growth, along with identifying needed supports that will assist in eliminating these gaps. ISB utilizes national research and examples from other states to provide a meaningful data analysis tool for all school districts. This year, the Equity Journey Continuum utilizes the pre-pandemic data from the 2018-2019 school year. The Equity Journey Continuum looks at 3 data areas: student learning, learning conditions, and elevating educators. Student learning utilizes data about student achievement, English learner proficiency, and former EL data, graduation rates, and access to AP and dual credit courses. The learning conditions element considers expulsion and suspension rates, student attendance, and climate survey results. Educator, student, and administrator demographics, along with teacher education and evaluation, and teacher qualifications are utilized within the Elevating Educators measure. ISB utilizes a series of formulas to calculate a level 1 through 4 in each of the 3 categories for each school district. Level 1 signifies the district has large equity gaps in that area, while a level 4 signifies minimal equity gaps. So if we're looking at our data here at LT, the Equity Journey Continuum identified large gaps in student learning. And for learning conditions, the Equity Journey Continuum identified moderate gaps, while the Equity Journey Continuum identified small gaps in LT's Elevating Educators data. So at this time, I would like to turn it back over to Scott so that he can share a little bit more with us about the Equity Journey Continuum and the report card and the observations we made from this data.
So again, as we mentioned, the combined graduation rate is over 95%. That's half of our rating. Our 9th grade on track is 97%, and that is something that we've really worked very hard to improve upon. And we would even argue that we don't think that the calculation is fair, because all but, I believe, many students were made up their failures from first semester before they finished freshman year, but the calculation doesn't take that into account. So but in any case, 97 is a great number. We would just argue it's higher. Our chronic absenteeism does remain high, and again, as you've heard, and as you'll see more throughout the year, we've seen a significant shift in that for this year. So we're very encouraged by the work that we've done to get students back in school. With 34% of our English learners meeting their yearly proficiency target, we see that as certainly an area of growth. We can definitely do better there. And then in all areas of the journey continuum, we saw gaps with, again, the biggest gaps being in that student performance, which is demonstrated in all the data we've shared with you tonight. So the more that we look at where we need to target and where our focus has to be, it's pretty clear from the data that we've seen today.
So really, honestly, the way we focus on all this data is what does this mean in terms of the work ahead? And if you guys, if our whole board thinks about what happened last spring with strategic planning, it was very broad, and there wasn't a lot of specificity to the work we were doing. It was really about building that roadmap. The last 8 to 10 weeks as we've started the school year have been way more about the specificity of that. So how do we take a really broad goal and a couple of sort of visionary strategies and create task lists associated with that? Like, what is the work that we're going to be doing in order to accomplish that goal? That's living the plan. That's the most important work. So I think I shared with the board back in September, we had about 85 people participate on 5 different action planning teams for each of the 5 goals. All staff participated. Over the next couple of months, we're going to share a different update for each goal. But tonight, very appropriate to share the Goal 1 update. Even though this data really comprises both Goal 1 and Goal 2, the focus of it is on Goal 1. And so really what that's meant is we have 2 documents that are in your packet that Scott's going to talk about. There's a goal strategy slide that outlines some of the tasks associated with each goal. And then there's a data dashboard template that's also there, which is the next document. He'll refer to all of these. But that really explains the rationale for the goal and outlines the tasks that are associated with achieving the goal. He's going to focus tonight on 2 primary things that we believe will have the biggest impact on the data that you just heard. And that is the curriculum review process, which Virginia and Kirsten are going to talk about as well. And then also our partnership with Equal Opportunity Schools, which we believe will increase representation and access to our highest level courses. So goal tonight is to share that strategic plan Goal 1 update. We'd like to do in December, do a couple more goals, and then again in January as well, so that we have time to share the updates with the board. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Scott to go through the strategic plan goal update.
I just have a quick question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Because we're kind of moving.
Yeah.
When we look at the summative designation, so when we are rated commendable, but it says no underperforming student groups. Like, so I'm not getting where we do have underperforming student groups. So I'm not sure.
There's a state definition for that. So we
Right. So is it like
compared to
that?
other
It's
schools.
like we're better than the lowest of the low.
Yeah,
I'm not
that's-
trying to.
No.
I'm
That's
not trying to be.
No, it's a great question. The way that they do it is each school's data results in like one number, and they take those numbers and they rank them from highest to lowest, and the top 10% become exemplary. The bottom 5% end up in that comprehensive support. The number that top bottom 5% school gets as their score is the target number that they use for underperforming. So if any of our subgroups were below that top 5%, we are labeled to have an underperforming subgroup. Does that kind of make sense?
Yes, so it's like playing with numbers,
Yeah,
basically.
their definition.
When we are not
Yes.
necessarily.
Yes, their definition is way different than how we would define it.
So then do you have any schools, like, are like probably 80% of the schools then are, or I guess 80% commendable, and then 10% are the exemplary, and then like maybe the other 10 or 8% is
that high. Do you know what percent of schools are commendable, Christine?
It is, I think it's 81% were commendable at the high school level. They did post some descriptive statistics that I'm pulling up right now on the ISB website. So at the high school level, 10% of high schools were exemplary, 81% were commendable, 3% fell in that targeted, and then 6% were in comprehensive. And the reason that is 6% and not 5% is you have to have 67% graduation rate. So if more than 5% of your schools have less than 67% graduation, you end up with more schools in comprehensive. Yes, you are correct. Most schools end up in the commendable rating.
Thank you.
And I just had one question about the Equity Journey Continuum. I understood the criteria that they're using for student learning and elevating educators, but what are the metrics that they're using to assess learning conditions?
Dr. Rowe, do you have that information?
Christine is much better at the understanding that data, so I don't know if you can. share more about that.
They are using
Student behavior.
in school suspension, out of school suspension, expulsion data. They're using a lot of 5 Essentials data.
Okay.
And in the 2018-2019 school year, we did not administer the 5 Essentials survey. We did an alternate survey, so we don't have some of the data that they're using for that learning conditions.
So I'm sorry, and could you repeat the part of your question? So I thought,
I was just looking for how they were, what metrics they were using for the learning conditions.
Yeah,
Yes.
so they also use site-based expenditure reporting, which when we're one school, that doesn't really apply to us either. And then a lot of it is the climate survey.
Gotcha.
And then student attendance is the last one that we missed.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
I'll send you guys the link. There's a really good cheat sheet on the ISB website that has the exact metrics that are used.
Oh, yeah,
I'll
I would
send
like
to you
that.
guys.
That'd be great.
sorry, I thought
That's
you meant
okay.
the formula for that. I was
Oh.
like, I don't know the formula.
No,
For
you're-
understanding it.
No,
But
that-
yes, the basic one is that discipline data.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. Thank you both.
Did we link the Illinois school report card? Was that at one time, I thought, on our website too? Was like, we have a link straight to it, okay. Okay, great.
What about all of the slides from tonight? Will that,
Yeah, we can put that on the website too. Yeah, so that's on the About LTHS site. On the left-hand side, there's a school report card link. So this is the data that was publicly available on Thursday, October 27th at 9 a.m. that I referenced in a couple weekly updates a couple weeks ago. But I'll share that link because it's a really good.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Goal 1? All right. So you'll recall that goal 1 is our student growth and achievement goal with the desire to provide a comprehensive, innovative education for every student to ensure that all students grow and achieve. Ultimately, the strategic planning process identified 3 strategies. The first one was to deliver a guaranteed, viable, and rigorous curriculum for all students. The second strategy to provide engaging and equitable instructional learning experiences for all students aligned to the district's vision. And the third strategy, bring consistencies to assessment and feedback processes supported by research and student staff voice. If you'll recall, the way we developed these strategies came out of looking at data similar to what you saw tonight. So if you look at those data reports and just lop off the most recent number, that's really what we were looking at as we were putting these goals together and these strategies. So, one of the things we wanted to make sure as we move forward with the growth and achievement goal is that we are addressing those specific needs in those specific institutions. You'll also note that the primary means of measuring academic growth at the high school is through the SAT and a PSAT 8, 9, a PSAT 10, and an SAT. Those students who took the SAT last year never took a PSAT 9 or a PSAT 10. And for all of them, it was the first time they took a paper assessment. All of their tests previously had been computer-based. So as we've been looking and talking to students and seeing the way that things are going forward, that's something we're also looking at in that strategy 3 for how we're using the test data and begin to help our students with that. The one thing we do note too going forward, just sort of as an aside, the SAT is moving online entirely starting next year. So that's again going to be a shift for students and for the test itself. That being said, those 3 areas, as we began to tackle them and came up with the specific areas of focus, if we look at strategy 1, that's to deliver a guaranteed, viable, and rigorous curriculum. And we have a number of items there that we're doing to make sure that we are doing just that. The biggest one is that review of district curriculum, and you'll see under those sub-bullets some of the components of what that district curriculum review is focusing on. So again, keep in mind a curriculum review is not a rewrite of all curriculum. It is taking a look at the curriculum that exists and ensuring that a number of things are happening, including that you're aligned to priority skills and standards. If you look at all of our courses, and if we use English and math as an example, there are standards for those. The state has adopted standards. They are the Common Core standards, but they have adopted those. But there are more standards there that you could possibly teach or assess. So the purpose of our curriculum review is to look on priority skills. And we want to make sure that the skills that we are prioritizing are those that lead to higher level thinking, that lead to what's being assessed on the SAT, that lead to those areas of focus that we know lead to the strengths that we're looking for. We're also making sure that all Illinois standards and mandates are covered, that we are articulating our success criteria for students, which is basically just saying, here's what you need to do in order to get the grades in these areas. We're coming up with rubrics so students can get feedback on those formative assessments. Coming up with common formative and summative assessments. Again, we've been talking about that for a number of years. Part of this review is this, if we're making changes to those skills and standards, if we're adding new mandates, we're creating new assessments, we're reviewing those rubrics. We are adding some things in here that have not really been a focus at LT. In the past, we've always said our curriculum is the strength and we automatically address SAT. Given our SAT performance, we're adding specifically some SAT alignment in all of our curriculum. So starting with that freshman year, what are literacy and numeracy areas of focus that we can embed to prepare students to do well on that SAT? We've also begun, and that sort of jumps into strategy 3 a little bit too, and that is to provide some test prep for the teachers. We've been doing that with our math and English teachers in particular with SAT. We're also adding in SEL competencies because, again, that's something we talk about a lot, but how do we embed it in the program? How do we embed it into the curriculum? So those are being reviewed as part of that review. And then adding in culturally responsive pedagogy, looking at Goldie Muhammad's five areas. That's really important too, so that we are being deliberate about all these things. We want to make sure that our students see themselves in the curriculum, especially for our students who are who have not performed as well. We want to make sure that the curriculum is accessible to them as well. That's just the curriculum review component, and we'll talk a little bit more. Actually, probably now would be the best time to do that. So, my two assistants here tonight, we have Kirsten Bacon and Virginia. They are working with our teams. The way we're doing the curriculum review is I'm meeting with all of the core groups as well as with the chairs, but our instructional coaches are also assigned a team. And the instructional coaches are really there to help get the team moving forward as well, meeting in Kirsten's case within their PLCs. So she's been meeting with them in a number of different ways. So as we flow through the curriculum review process, we're also addressing these pieces systematically and then working along throughout the year. So it's not just a 3-hour window every quarter, it's followed up by the time during the PLC. So ladies, if you want to share a little bit of what you're doing.
Good evening. I'm Virginia Condon, and I'm an instructional coach and also teach English at the senior level. My name is Kirsten Bacon, and I'm an instructional coach. I this year actually teach EL reading and EL tutorial, and we're looking at two other coaches who will be here tonight, Nancy, who's also an EL teacher, and Amy Johnson, who works with our co-teaching initiative, and with the district teachers.
And as our SAT coordinator.
Guru. She's my favorite guru. As you will recall, from this past summer, a team of 12-plus history teachers worked in June to look at their course and to reinvent it, actually, at the junior level, and at both the prep and Excel levels, too. To be in kind with current standards and new revised U.S. history mandates. The U.S. history teachers are implementing this new curriculum designed this summer right now. And I cannot say enough about their pioneering work. They are amazing educators to rush into this course and teach in a thematic way in an expedited capacity. They have essentially created unit plans for their first semester of their course and are adapting and adjusting along the way to make sure they are hitting their goals and targets. And at the same time, they reinvented the course to give it a more modern approach rather than the traditional chronological order. For instance, the first unit this year started the students off with some vital skills and critical thinking questions, a dive into conspiracy theories with the essential question, how do we form opinions and navigate the information age? By using historical as well as current conspiracy theories, students delved into source credibility and accuracy in research. They are moving into planning the second semester details at our next half-day meeting. I'm also working with the English 1 team at the freshman level. Although priority skills have been a staple in the language arts curriculum for years, this team is reevaluating the concentration of skills needed at the freshman level. They have chosen specific Common Core standards in the areas of language, reading, speaking and listening, and writing. They have designed rubrics for these specific skills to be used at the prep and diploma levels and are ready to look at the structure and organization of the course, as well as the unit essential questions and assessments. They are moving along.
I was asked to help with the algebra and biology teams. I'm going to start with the algebra curriculum. It's very interesting because a lot of the shift is with them having kind of two buckets of standards, if you look at it that way. We have something called math practice standards, which is the largest shift in our curriculum, and then you have our kind of traditional math concepts. So if you think of the math practice standards, that is something that really shifts away from the more traditional math approach that maybe everyone in this room is used to. Those standards are more covering the thinking and behavior that goes into developing more of a math-minded student. So even if you're coming in at a place where you don't feel like you are a math kid or you don't think mathematically, that's where we're charging our teachers to say, what can we initiate, what can we kind of instill in our students to be able to develop that at this level. So if you think of the math concepts as your more, can you add and subtract fractions? Can you evaluate a linear function? Which if you asked me if I could do that, the answer is no. But, that's the more traditional approach. So the shift becomes with the math practices. I'll give you one is to make sense of problems and persevere in solving them. So in asking our teachers to approach that, there's a lot that goes into that, where the students would be asked to look at a problem, evaluate different entry points, start at an entry point, get through if they can. If they can't, evaluate another entry point, try to get through, not give up, and then evaluate their answer or their response in terms of what the larger question was asking. So in order to be able to do that, though, and do that well, we're asking our teachers to not just change the task at hand, which is kind of a hurdle in itself, but also the language that the teacher is using in the classroom and the language that we're asking our students to use in the classroom. And that's just one of 8 math practice standards. So they've got a lot of work ahead of them, but my algebra team has been very open-minded, and Colin, like Mr. Eggerding said, he kind of earmarked a common plan period for them. So I get to meet with them during the half days, but also during their common plan weekly in order to keep kind of the ball all order in front of them. The other team is the biology team, and their standards are similar. They actually have kind of like a 3-pronged approach. The NGSS, which is the Next Generation Science Standards, looks at science learning in kind of 3 dimensions. So where math has 2 buckets, science has 3, which, is task for them. So they have the science and engineering practices, they have the cross-cutting concepts, and then they also have the disciplinary core ideas. Both teams, again, have that common planning, which has been, I think, a huge help in them getting kind of a strong foot in looking at and unpacking their standards, which are very dense, and then looking at their units to say where they are and are not meeting the needs of the students in order to be able to approach and not completely redo, but revamp
the curriculum that they have in front of them. So at this point, all of our teams will continue to revise and implement this work as Mr. Eggerding has outlined in the process. So we just wanted to say on behalf of the coaches, but definitely the teachers, thank you for providing the time and resources for these teams. It's a lot for us to be able to do this during the school day. It's a big ask of teachers and they're rising to the occasion. The work is definitely challenging and messy, but very enlightening for, I think, all of us involved, and we're grateful for your support as we change our curriculum to make everything sustainable, engaging, and viable for all of our students in front of us.
That's just
Thank
one
you.
little sliver of strategy one.
Yeah.
But it's a long-range sliver. In your packet, I gave you some of the research behind why we're doing what we're doing with this document. Why should we ensure students have access to guaranteed and viable curriculum? We grounded all of the freshman teams in this document. So I recommend that you take a look at it because these are all the reasons why this is important and why it gets to making the changes that will lead to those improved outcomes for students. The other thing that you'll note, this is not a short-term plan. This plan, as you see up on the screen there, is a 5-year plan, so we can review all the curriculum. We're starting with freshmen for a number of reasons. We wanted to make sure, again, if we have freshmen on track as a measure, we have our freshmen here, we can align to that SAT 8-9, the PSAT 8-9. We're then building this group forward, right? As we build forward, and we also have added co-teaching to this current freshman group, we are moving this whole group then through the school with these new initiatives and these new targets. The students won't know that everything's new every year. The teachers are seeing that things are new every year. So that's why that support is really important. You'll also notice that electives are a component of this, and electives also tie in particular to another strategy one, which has to do with those career pathways. And the more that we can align the electives that we offer to be sequential, that lead toward credentials, that give students the opportunity to go deeper into one particular area, especially if a student has that interest already, that gives them a better sense of what they want to do with that area prior to choosing a college, going to a college, or even choosing if college is not the right place for them. All of those career areas also, there's some even more high-powered versions of those that lead to internships and even more credentialing, and we're looking to add at least 6 of those areas over the next 5 years as well. Other areas in strategy in goal 1 has to do with strategy 2, and that is applying, providing an engaging and equitable instructional learning experience for all of our students. That's where equal opportunity schools is a component, but it's not everything. We want to make sure that we are applying that equity lens to the course options which ensure equity and access to learning content. So we want to make sure, again, that it doesn't matter where you start or who you are, that as you walk into our courses, you see yourself and you have the ability to succeed, that you're not sort of relegated to a lower level or some other level. So we've made some changes. We've dropped that humanities program. We're looking at making some other changes to increase that rigor with the supports that go along with it. This is where Dr. Waterman mentioned goal 2 is all about the supports. And so when Dr. Owens, or soon to be Dr. Owens, shares that information, you'll see kind of how these overlap. That being said, we want to remove all those barriers. We want to increase student voice and engagement, and also be deliberate in placing students. And that's where Equal Opportunity Schools comes in. Our Equal Opportunity Schools engagement is to survey all of our students. In surveying those students, trying to find out what students' goals and interests are, and then very deliberately reviewing that data and making some recommendations for students to take more advanced curriculum. So the last page of my area of the package, you'll see this Equal Opportunity Schools update. This is what's called an opportunity chart. And what this boils down to is they take your medium, high income white students and make that your goal. So 70% of our medium to high income white, non-Hispanic students are in an AP class, right? The goal is to then have the same proportion of our students as we have in our overall school. So our percentage of Black and African American students, our percentage of Hispanic, Latinx students, Asian students in our AP courses. So you'll notice that these numbers are sort of wide ranging because we have more students who are Hispanic, Latinx than are Asian. So, but the goal regardless is to find those students that are ready for an AP course and place them in those courses and give them the supports that they need to succeed, to get to be in that course and earn a grade. That is what College Board says is what's even more important than a three-year hire. Three-year hires give you the credit at the college level, but what the College Board has said and what Equal Opportunity Schools focus on is just being in the class and knowing the rigor and learning of the rigor gives you a leg up for when you're ready to move on to college. You can say that you're able to do it, you know you can do it, and that is even more important than worrying about a 3 or a 2. What this chart tells us is after our first year, we still have some gaps. We need roughly 11 Black African American students in the medium-high income range and 9 in the low income range. We need 68 Hispanic Latinx students in the medium-high income range, 52 in the low income range. That being said, the little table down below is what we did after 1 year. So what we did is we went from 13% of our students, 13% of our medium-high income students to 40%. So we had a 27% increase in the number of students. We're still missing 11, but we grew pretty significantly in our medium-high Black student area. You'll see in our Hispanic Latinx area, we grew from 38% to 50%, and our low income from 16 to 26%. All areas of growth, which our Equal Opportunity Schools partners were rather impressed with. We had about double the placement growth as they expected in a first year. And then we've also been keeping track of those students, and our percentage of students dropping out of those levels that we specifically identified is lower than self-identified students. So we feel we're on the right track. We're going to do another midterm review here in the next couple of weeks and see where we are by the end of the semester. But we're still 163 kids away from having our AP classes look like our overall school population. But that's the target really for EOS and what we're working on with them. And then lastly, in that strategy 3 area, having not only to do with assessment and improving our formative and summative assessments, making sure our grading practices are fair and equitable, but we're also using that SAT data. Amy Johnson, who couldn't be here tonight, she is constantly sending me emails of, hey, we could do this, hey, we could do that. We could give everybody access to Khan Academy. We could look at our evidence-based reading and writing scores, send it to every kid, and show them what they need to do in order to improve. I love her energy and enthusiasm. We need to figure out a way to systematize it so a kid will actually do it, because I don't know about you, but I know if my kids got that email, they'd be like, nah, cool, you know. But if you've got someone there side by side helping them through it, you know, that's really the key. So that's, again, the things that we're looking on as we go forward. And really, it's been a very fast-paced, but I think very focused start to this process. So I'd be happy to answer it.
I think the big thing that we've never talked about explicitly here is that these, all the strategies, but just speaking specifically about tonight, the 3 strategies outlined in Goal 1 aren't strategies because we see them as areas of strength. They were identified during the spring throughout the strategic planning process because they're areas of growth. That's the whole definition of why we do strategic planning in the first place. These are 3 strategies that we see as we're working from a deficit area and we need to improve upon. So that's why I don't know that I've ever shared that or been explicit with that, and that goes throughout the other 4 goals as well, that the specific strategies to each goal are because we see them as areas of improvement.
That and a whole lot more is all about Goal 1.
Yeah, wow.
A lot of data.
That's a
There's
lot.
also what you have in your packet is the more formal document that all of us are working from. So really, we're also looking to develop access on PSYOP training. That's really for diverse learner strategies, in particular ELs. So we just added very recently, starting this year, and we want to get some momentum on it, some lunch, just teachers who are choosing to, on their lunchtime, learn more about PSYOP training, which is for, again, ELs and Gen Ed classes. We're also going to add that to the year 2 mentoring process for new teachers. So again, these are all things that we're looking to do just this year, and then with the grades and grading as well. So definitely with that strategy 1, freshman core curriculum is the big focus.
So with equal opportunity schools, how are you identifying the income levels?
Income levels, that's based on free and reduced lunch.
Right. Okay, so if you have free and reduced lunch, then you're being categorized into low income?
Yes.
And then everybody else is mid-income to high?
Correct.
Okay.
So when you're looking at the low income, you would have so what if somebody was low income for like preschool, grade school, and then all of a sudden that changed? That could actually have an impact upon where they are.
Yeah, the way that equal opportunity schools, we share data with them, and that data is captured each year. So we based on that particular year. So
it's only a snapshot at that point in time. So that child could go from low income to not, I mean, and they could be teetering on the edge, I think is where the concern would be.
We've seen the students move in and out.
Yeah.
Right. I guess that's right.
Yeah.
You always have the
Well,
right
we've had
words.
students already qualified now. I mean, based on the economy, some people are struggling, right? So people are saying, look, my dad lost a job or whatever, and so now they wouldn't have been in that.
So it's very fluid. The
Somewhat,
income
yeah.
level is.
Yeah, I mean, our numbers are large enough for some of our larger groups that it doesn't make that much of a difference, but you'll notice in the 2 or more races group, that's a very fluid group to begin with, and that just sort of jumps around different every year. There's really not a whole heap to predict from that.
Thank you for this presentation. It was a lot.
Yes.
But a lot of really important information to really help us understand how we can deliver the best educational program here at LT. So I really appreciate all of it. I don't have a particular order, although I've got your curriculum review plan up on my screen right now. And you know, I'm thrilled that process has started, and it sounds very aggressive and speedy, which was elaborated by your 2 team members. What are we, as I'm looking at like stage 2, 3, and 4 of just this year, you know, I'm kind of thinking, well, like what are they doing in stages 2, 3, and 4 when they haven't had the benefit of being in stage 1? And I realize obviously there's things that can be done, but I guess my bigger question is, I love the way that this year's freshmen will kind of be moved through, and that's great. I mean, we should really see some definite progress, I would hope, in their data and in their performance. But how do we implement things this year, next year for our current sophomores and juniors? The seniors are obviously matriculating, but how is that being handled so that we try to capture some of those students and
Sure, yeah, so we don't just write off that group and say we'll start.
and not that I think we would, I was just looking for some firmer handles.
We're following our prior process. So our prior process has articulated standards. We have taken a look at how 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade English, for example, progress. Our world languages have looked at those Indiana University courses and backward mapped down to the 1st and 2nd year. They've all been doing that, and they did that work prior to the pandemic. They're still monitoring, implementing, and refining those practices. So they're not just sort of twiddling their thumbs and waiting for a return. So they're doing what we've always done. I mean, we've never done this formal of a review of our curriculum, but our chairs are constantly working on different areas when new standards come up, when different shifts happen. So when an AP course changes or gets added, that's always a constant process. So that's all happening and will continue to happen. Well, I mentioned a little bit about the PSAT and SAT prep. Christine and Amy have been working with our divisions, math and English, to go over some of those things for everybody, not just the freshman teams, right? So if you want to mention something a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I've been working with the math team just because my background is in math, and I've been working with College Board on the early dismissal days. We're doing 4 strategic trainings. The first one was like an overview on College Board SAT. What does it assess? What does the test look like? This next one that we're planning for later in November, we're going to actually dig into the data and look at areas of strength, opportunities for growth. We're going to look at questions that students actually saw on the SAT and how they did on it, like what were commonly chosen incorrect answers, so that teachers have that information that they can start to embed in their class. Amy and I are both making a slide deck. She's making one for English, I'm making one for math, that junior level teachers can use as bell ringers second semester with some of those commonly missed SAT questions to help students review some material that maybe they saw freshman year that they haven't seen in a while, to kind of help prepare for that SAT class. So by no means teaching to the test, but just making sure that we're using the data to identify areas of strength, opportunities for growth, and then embedding strategies to address those opportunities for growth in our classes.
So we can see specifically what LT has not been, the specifics of what LT has not done well question-wise, and
Yeah, so each spring they release one version of the test, and it's usually that primary test day that the majority of our students take. And once they release that test, I can pull a report that shows the actual item and then the percentage of students that select each answer choice.
of LT kids.
Of LT kids, and we can compare it to the state as well. So we can see, on this question, 25% of LT students got it correct. Well, at the state level, only 5% got it correct. We can also sort by what are the easy questions that a lot of our kids missed, so that we know those are maybe some skills or standards that we need to address. What we're finding is it's not necessarily the content our students are struggling with. It might be the way the question is worded. A lot of times when I was a math teacher, I would ask students to solve this system of equations, and I would ask them to give me the ordered pair, the x comma y. Well, College Board might ask, what's the y coordinate when you solve the system of equations? Our students can do that, but they might not be used to the way they're being asked to share their answer. So just kind of looking at those things with our teachers so they're familiar with the different ways College Board is asking students to share their knowledge.
Amy's also diving into this slide here where we
Yes.
mentioned that you want to be in the top 2, the darker blue. She's diving into that third area and seeing what's the low-hanging fruit? What are the simple things we can really hit right away? Figure out what classes they're in, that kind of stuff.
That's excellent.
So that, again, that's kind of her specialty. She's given me 3 emails about that in the last 2 weeks.
That's great, because you have to believe that a good percentage of those students are they're right there at the water line. It's just they're right there. Yeah.
I was just going to add that in addition, Scott mentioned some of the components of the new curriculum process, alignment to SEL standards, culturally responsive pedagogy. Those are areas that we've identified for PLCs to work within as well. So this year, each of our teams picked a line of inquiry to study, and the 4 options were at social emotional learning standards and trauma-informed practices, culturally responsive pedagogy, implementation of instructional technology, and then disciplinary literacy, which our instructional coaches are leading. So each of our teams selected a strand, and then we've identified some PLC days throughout the year where, in addition to the team working and doing some learning and some action research on their own, Dr. Rowe and Leslie, our instructional coaches and our tech coaches, are delivering some formal professional development as well. So the thought is, right, teams of cross-content areas, even if they're not involved in the curriculum process right now, are getting exposure to the really important components of the process so that they'll be even more prepared to enter the discussion when their team's up for that curriculum review. So just continue to build momentum, expand our learning within those areas in another time during that professional collaboration time that we're utilizing for that learning as well.
Excellent. Co-teaching and a thorough review of our EL program. So all really significant components, because again, our students with IEPs are performing well, our ELs are performing well. So how do we target them as well?
Yeah, that's great. I thought that the AP data has a lot of celebrations in there. It's great, the increase in the number of kids. I was particularly elated to see the high percentage of students that are receiving 3 and above. And, you know, the great growth in that, you have to imagine that's going to continue, so that's really exciting. The PSAT, it was interesting that the PSAT 9 receives the highest scores. Are we looking, or you know, I realized there was, with COVID and not having the tests taken by a couple of years of students now, we're at a lax for looking at some cohort data, but are we looking at, we have the opportunity now, I would believe, to compare 9th grade and look at same students across years to see, is 9th grade really the high performer, or is it that particular group of kids and so forth? And is that something that we...
So the PSAT 8-9 and the PSAT 10 were canceled the last 2
Yeah,
years.
right.
So we don't really have that data, but it is definitely something we will be looking at moving forward.
Yeah.
We're encouraged by that as being a baseline. Obviously, the PSAT 9 is an easier test, but it also is technically covering what they've learned already.
Right.
So we hope to see that stay at that level and rise.
Exactly,
rather than-
and not to decline, yeah, exactly. And then, I guess, you know, I appreciate that the strategic plan frames all this work out, you know, gives a common opportunity and marching ground for this improvement. You know, looking at the number, I did have another question, but looking at the numbers from 2018 forward, from last year's presentation forward, you know, the English, ELA and math has declined. And then some of those declines continue to outpace the decline in the state, which I know will be corrected, and that's why we're doing this work, and thank you for the thoroughness of that. The only other question I had related to tonight's data is, last year we didn't have any data for all of 2021 with the way that it was presented to us last year. This year, is that 2021, or the data, was that the fall data that was optional for?
Yeah, so there is some fall 2020 SAT data in there.
Yeah.
That would be seniors who optionally took it in the fall because their spring assessment was canceled. So in the assessment reports that you guys have, there is some of that data in there. So it might look a little higher than the surrounding years, and that's because it was optional.
Okay.
We didn't force students to come in and take it, is we waived the graduation requirement that year. So it was really just the students that wanted to come in.
So we're looking at a skewed data set from that year. Okay, thank you. That was it. I'm super excited, very excited to you know, to see how this you know, what things look like as outcomes of all the really important work that you all are doing. So thank you.
Scott mentioned 2 things, implementation of co-teaching and improvements to EL, and that's going to be in a goal that Leslie is putting together for January. So we'll highlight those 2 programs.
So I know it was canceled the last 2 years, like the PSAT 9 and 10. Excuse me, but so when, just as Scott was mentioning, is there a way, because I think that a lot of students, when they take that as a freshman and sophomore, they just get the score, and their parents may get the score, but then there's nothing that is done with it or acted upon it. Is there any best practices across like other schools or districts that take that data and somehow incorporate some of those learnings so that students can be able to start to take some actionable steps from it, versus just get the score and really maybe 30-40% don't even know really what that means, especially in their freshman year?
Great question. So one of the reasons College Board won the contract with the state is because of its access to free practice for students. So if you guys recall, years past, ACT was the test we gave. ISB went out to bid and College Board won, and that's why we became an SAT state. SAT has 10 free practice tests out there that you don't have to pay for that you can get. But the biggest draw to SAT is their partnership with Khan Academy. So students can link their PSAT 8-9 and their PSAT 10 and their PSAT NMSQT scores to Khan Academy. And what that will do is it will use the data from their assessment to create an individualized learning plan for that student. That student can then log on through Khan Academy and get practice based on their test scores. And Khan Academy and College Board has done research that shows if students take the time to do that practice, they raise their SAT score by quite a bit. So that is that's the number one way that schools use the PSAT 8-9 and the PSAT 10 data to help those students make the data meaningful.
And are we like communicating that with every kid or every parent really, because that might be driven through
We have in the
parents.
past, but we have not taken an active role on our side. And that's what Amy Johnson's really pushing. To put together as a very active appointment.
I have talked to the junior counselors and they're hoping that they can get it into their guidance, their group guidance. With us not having the PSAT 9 and 10 in past years, we really haven't had that opportunity to use it. So that's something that we're hoping to kind of get better at embedding.
With the instruction, with the tech coaches and attendants to see how we can create a Canvas page for a kid to go and just get their stuff right there on campus. That's going to be a little more finagling, but
Like all their scores or?
yeah, and then they could just log onto Canvas, get their info, and go right to Khan from the Canvas page. That might take a little while, but that's a great idea that we're definitely looking into.
And to your point, Michael, there's a lot of best practices layered in there, right? Explicitly sharing a score with a kid, working with them to share what it means, setting goals, and then giving them an opportunity to practice with a resource that's available. So a lot of best practices layered in there, and a great resource for us to start to use or start using again with our students.
And I'm sure there's opportunities for their teachers too to make comments about that kind of, especially if you're weaving in strategies that help with their SAT performance. At that curriculum level, they have an opportunity to say those kinds of things to students, reminders, especially as we get closer and ramp up to that time.
One of our big foci has to do with our social studies curriculum, because a lot of that evidence-based reading and writing is not literature. It's nonfiction, it's reading charts and graphs, and that comes in our social studies curriculum. So as we're doing that freshman curriculum review with world history, we're embedding that in there. That's got to be a part of that. Same with civics, sophomore year, and then U.S. history junior year. So that's a really important component, and it always has been. But I think when people see that reading score, they think it's English only. The English, actually, what they need to focus on is some of the grammar and the way that SAT asks questions about grammar. But again, all things that can be practiced, and then you know exactly how many grammar questions are going to be asked. We're a little nervous about the new test. The new SAT test is going to be
Format.
more like a map test, so it's going to adjust its level to the student. So all these things we've been planning may be a little different already.
So the new digital SAT is supposed to be adaptive, which means if a student gets a question right, they get a harder question. If they get a question wrong, they'll get an easier question, just like NWEA MAP is. They've been piloting it internationally and in some schools in the US, but we will learn more about that as it rolls out. I know the 4th session that I'm doing with math teachers and College Board is going to focus on that digital aspect.
So wash away another set of data.
I was just like, yeah, no benchmark stays the
We'll
same.
massage it and show how it matches, but
Norm it.
yeah. But
they'll figure out
the
what
other
to
thing,
norm
though, we may be coming back later in the spring. We are currently debating whether the very first online SAT should be the one that counts in the spring, or whether we should do one in the fall. And so that's something we're debating about, whether we do a PSAT and a MSQT for all juniors in the fall. So we're
What was that?
normally the one in the fall is the National Merit Scholarship Qualifying Test.
Right.
So like 10% of our students take it.
Right.
This would be one we'd have all of our students take it, because it would be the computer-based version for the first time. just trying to figure out the logistics of that. That's an early warning.
Oh, boy. I don't want to harp on this because I know there's a lot of good things coming and a lot of great growth and achievement, but I want to make sure that, like, when I'm looking at the college readiness and the college board and the SAT scores, and I want to make sure, like, it says math performance is strong at 54 to 59%. We don't really think we're at a strong level. I mean, I don't want to be super negative about this, but it concerns me that we think we're at a strong level at that 54% of college readiness at that. Statistically, we can't be in a strong position there, right? I mean.
That's when you stack it up like this, you know, the two darker blues, that's that 54%. We want to obviously move that 22 in higher, and we want to move the 24 at the bottom out, right? So that's always the goal. This is something that's been a bone of contention for a lot of schools because Illinois chooses a higher threshold than the College Board. Our numbers are better, obviously, with the different threshold. That being said, this does give us an opportunity to focus on that rigor. And yeah, we look at these numbers and we are not saying, you know, great stuff, we're good. We're saying, how do we move more students out? How do we move more math students out of that bottom? And roughly what it's saying is 1/4 of our math students are not even close, right? So again, that's something we have to be concerned about.
Okay. I wanted to make sure that
definitely
we were on the same page of where we thought those were. Yeah, it's saying it was strong because I don't feel like we're strong. I mean,
comparatively it's strong, but we want to be better.
Comparatively to?
When you compare to other schools and other demographic area, it's something that we haven't done this year yet with my CADCA group. Usually it'll come in the spring. We'll share our data with each other and then sort of spread it out based on a continuum. We can change the different axes, but basically what you're looking at is what are other schools with our similar demographics and how are they performing versus how we're performing. And that's something that we've used all along to determine if are we above the middle or below the middle, that kind of thing. So, and then when you see that school that's in our area but is really blowing it out of the water, what are they doing differently? You know, those are the ones that we can all look at Stevenson High School and go, oh, I wish we were Stevenson High School. But we don't have their demographics or their makeup, and they don't have the ELs that we have and all that kind of stuff. So we want to look in our area.
So we haven't done that yet, but we will be doing that.
Yeah, we do that on an annual basis. We've got to get on that. Usually there's someone who's already started that process, so we'll have a meeting coming up and I'll push for it.
I'm with that interactive. Does that help with that tool on the
to compare schools?
The comparison, yeah, will that help?
Not so much. They work with a group called ECRA to do that. And it's more of a data analytics.
There is a scatter plot on that interactive report card, though, that will allow you to look at low income on one axis, for example, and then math proficiency on the other. And so you can like see where we fall compared to other schools that have a similar low income percentage as us. And compared to similar schools, we do perform very strongly comparatively, as Scott said. But yes, we do have work to do, and we would like to see that higher. But when you think of it comparatively.
And that's only taking into SAT data. You know, I mean, you're not looking at overall grades, you're not looking at GPA, you're not looking at the learning experience, you know, all the other things that go into making up our whole student. So that's really just a piece of it.
No, but we were looking at the APs and such too. Sure. I mean,
yeah. I mean, we have kids who we know during the SAT 9 who bubble in all the bubbles and put their head down, right? So
Right.
how do we target that kid so that we get them to care about it as a PSAT 10 and so that they do well? Again, those kinds of things too. There's, in all these tests, and this is one of our concerns about the Illinois Science Assessment, when it's high stakes to the kid, they try harder. The Illinois Science Assessment is not high stakes to them, right? So they don't tend to try as hard, and that's kind of frustrating because we'd love to get that data. We want to see what they've actually learned. But the more we can make it a meaningful test to the kid, the more they're going to take it seriously, and the more it's going to reflect actual learning. Although all studies will tell you the number one indicator of future success for students in school is grades. No matter how you determine the grades are going to be your best indicator. But that being said, we get more information from this type of a test about specific skills.
Well, and these tests, I mean, to somebody made the point, I think you did, Christine, about, the slippery slope or the perception about teaching to the test. I mean, but these assessments that we're using are tied to Common Core standards, and so they are reflective of standards and skills, critical skills that we want our students to have. And to your point, Allison, I had the same reaction. And while the SAT test, even whether it's the ISB metric or the College Board metric, we're still low. And the biggest concern for me is that our decline over the years is outpacing the decline in the state. And that absolutely has to be turned around. And you gave us the plan tonight, and we talked, and I think the plan is in place to start reversing that trend. And, for that, I'm happy that we're looking forward and have a very developed plan to start making that go in the opposite direction, because that's not a trend that is acceptable.
So with math, is it a 2-year or 3-year requirement?
It's a 3-year requirement.
So have we looked at then the students who, because there's a high percentage of students who are coming in who are already taking geometry as a freshman. So are we looking at like a pattern of, is it like prep or is it Excel, algebra? Like the percentage of students in Excel, algebra, or prep that is falling in the not meeting standards by the time that they get to intermediate algebra?
I have not looked at that since coming to LT. I have looked at it in other places, so it's work that I have done and am familiar with, and it's something that Scott and I can work on and get back to you on that.
It's in part of our year 2 for the goal 1, is looking at how levels impact student performance and how we might focus there. But one of the reasons why we're doing the curriculum review with all levels in the same room is to ensure that rigor is there for the prep level as well as any other level. And talking through that with teachers about how you may have to remove some curriculum to spend more time to master the core concepts. That's a part of this conversation as well. There's also been some debate about whether there should be a 4-year requirement for math. That's another ongoing debate at the state level. One of the things we've been doing with that is for seniors that are not planning to go to a 4-year school, that we are putting them into a math class, a transition math class that we've partnered with COD in. So when they earn a grade in our class, they start in grade coursework at the college as opposed to placing into remedial coursework. So that's something, again, we want to make sure our students are walking out the door ready to go. That remedial score is also a part of the report card of the students who are placed in that remedial math class at the community college. So again, we want to improve that number. We want to make sure kids are walking out of here and they're paying tuition for credits they're earning rather than paying tuition for deficiencies they're fixing.
Right, because, well, I don't know that last part is, like, wholly, like, not saying that you're, like, mistaken, but students who are taking college algebra and go to COD and are taking, they still can fall into taking a remedial math.
They can, but if they take our transition math class senior year, they won't have to.
Right, but even taking college algebra here senior year, they can still fall into remedial math.
But not if they score the C or better in the class that we offer. That's an agreement we have with COD.
That's not what I've experienced.
I'd be happy to tell you about that one.
But
if that's the case, I have a problem with COD because it's not what we signed all the agreement to.
Yeah, and that's not what, yeah. But anyway, so I think that still, this all goes back to the placements of students coming in, where you see that over 70% of the students are already, have maybe, or 60% have already taken algebra in 8th grade. And it also gets to the college readiness of what we have said in the strategic plan and what Perry has identified as being ready, that you should have already taken algebra by the time they get here. That I think it's like it's too late that we're waiting like a year or two to be able to investigate that. That should be something that we should be looking at now, and also communicating back to the feeder schools, because we know this. And so it should be something that we act upon and do something to start to address.
Yeah, I mean, we have other goals, we have strategies related to articulation with our associate schools, so it's certainly something we can look at that up.
We are making one slight modification to the sophomore year curriculum review, and that's we are putting algebra 2 there instead of geometry for that reason, because we have students who supposedly did algebra 1 in middle school, and then took geometry. They haven't seen algebra 1 for over a year. We want to make sure our algebra 1 that we're doing this year is aligned to our algebra 2 directly. So that's the one slight alteration we're doing in our math pathway to address that as well. Because the students may have done algebra 1 in 8th grade, but it's been a while.
So you're not changing the sequence, you're just
No, but we're
putting
just
some
making sure we're articulating
content.
so that they're ready to go. And that a lot of times what'll happen, especially is teachers will say, well, they probably need this because it's been a while. Well, maybe they don't. So we want to make sure we're articulating the skills explicitly, and so that when they come in, they know where the students are.
You said something about the kids aren't motivated to do well on that science test because there's no win for them. What's going to happen as SAT, like as kids?
It's a big concern.
Okay,
More
because
colleges are saying we're test optional. It's a big concern that's all.
now
That's
that they're
why
switching
we
it
argued
online
so much
and-
that the SAT be our test. ACT or SAT, we didn't care, but it was a college entrance exam. The more that it becomes test optional, this may be the only test the student takes. It's an SAT because we make them at graduation. So again, that's why the more we've got to embed it into the curriculum so that when they get to it, they take it seriously and see a benefit to it. But no, it's a concern.
We saw this years ago with the the old PSAE test. I mean, day 1 mattered, day 2 did not matter. And there were significant differences between day 1 and day 2, and that was...
Everybody, that was incredible. I really appreciate it. Some new faces at the table and bringing really good insight, so thank you for all of that.
And thank you guys for all your work with
Thank
the
you.
curriculum review.
Awesome.
Appreciate it.
Publicly acknowledge this is Christine's first go at it.
Yes.
I know,
yes.
that was, your data and the breakdown was really, really impressive, so thank you. Thank you for that. Very, very clear. Good job, thanks. Okay. All right,
Fun times.
thanks, everybody. At this time now, we can begin non-agenda related portion of public comments. Marilyn, do we have any non-agenda? Okay, and so everybody stuck it out till 9 o'clock. If they want to leave, they can. I believe we have to switch gears now a little bit.
Yeah,
Dr.
switch
Warner.
gears. Before we switch gears, though, I want to give our leadership team an opportunity to sneak out before we get into
Yeah.
the resolutions discussion. So,
Yeah.
this is your guys' cue.
Thanks, you guys.
Thanks, everybody.
And to Virginia and Kirsten as well. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, I really appreciate it, all the work. Thanks, you guys. Have a good week.
Oh, I gotta unplug my computer here.
Also, a good time to go to the bathroom if anyone needs to.
Julie, you still there?
5-minute break will be good. I sure am.
All right.
I forgot about Julie.
Scott, thank you for all that.
They can't wait to get out of here. They didn't waste any time.
No, you go to your
I know.
I know.
Wow. Scott, meanwhile, my phone's blowing up with Abby, like, can Jenna spend the night? Can Jenna spend the night?
Why?
We're good. So I guess we can begin IASB resolutions. Just first of all, thanks again, Michael, for going on behalf of our board. Really do appreciate you. Yeah.
You're welcome.
And so if anybody's thinking of next year, start thinking about it now. Offer it up now. But thank you, Mike.
Let's not fight over it.
Right.
I mean, we might have to have a lotto.
Fine, Michael, you can do it.
Twist my arm.
Okay. What do we got?
Oh, am I starting?
Do you, well, I think if I just refresh, what we did last year was we basically went through each one, kind of had a, look around the table to see if it was something that would merit discussion. If it did, we would talk it through. If not, and we were in agreement, we just moved on. So we'll probably do that same thing, right, Michael? That sounds good to you?
Sure.
All righty. Sure. Okay. Take it away.
Okay, so the first resolution is called the fund balances Miller ratio adjustment. And basically, it is really districts looking at their fund balances not to be more than what they're recommending, I believe, is 2.5 times your operating expenditures. In the past, there has been school districts where there has been a fund balance that has been twice their operating balance, and that has triggered lawsuits where groups can come and sue the district because you have basically too much money that is not being, used. So this resolution is to really, because it said 2 to 3 in the past, this is now like anchoring into like a number of 2.5 times the expenditures, annual expenditures. And the resolutions committee is recommending that a district do adopt this resolution change.
Julie?
Yeah, I like this one, makes sense to me.
Me too. Simple enough? Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
The second is the alternative fuel school bus funding. This is basically a resolution that is kind of suggesting that you can have alternative like buses, but that have like these like fuel alternative fuel things, but the main contention is that there's not enough budget within districts for transportation already, and that if you add this in, that you're going to incur additional costs that you don't have really enough to cover already. So the resolution committee is, and I think there was something kind of similar last year, but they're again recommending that you do not adopt this resolution.
I agree. Julie?
Yeah, you're right. I think there was something very similar last year, and I do think we had some good discussion on it. And Michael, remind me, I know we just talked not that long ago, but when the resolutions committee does not recommend it, it is, I think, very unlikely that this would even be brought to a vote when Michael's there representing us, which I didn't quite appreciate going into last year. So there's like a really high threshold or hurdle for this to even be able to be voted upon, and you have to basically, person who brought it has to petition it, and there has to be support in the room of more than 50% to even bring it up for a vote, and most of those, if not all of them, died. So I don't, if I remember correctly, this won't even likely come up for discussion. So just with that extra backdrop.
I'm remembering you saying that now, Julie, yeah.
Right, but they can, people in the room can comment on it up to 3 minutes or 2 minutes. But as you said, that the people who brought this forward have to be the ones who say that they want to make a change to it. So right now, no other district can really make a change unless the presenting district agrees to that. And then, like you said, maybe it's 50 to 60% of the body there in the room have to agree at that time.
Yeah. With that long, lengthy backdrop, I'm comfortable with where we are heading, which is to not support it, along with go with the recommendation to not support it. Is that what I was hearing people in the room?
Yeah. It sounds like it,
We
yeah.
agree.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, the next resolution is the firearm dealer location. And so this is essentially recommending that that firearms dealers like not be within 1,500 feet of a school. So it's
Currently
moving
it's
it from
500,
500 feet to 1,500 feet of any school, preschool, or daycare facility. And there's like the resolutions committee has like kind of, I'll just kind of read this. The committee was concerned about the process of exemptions for current firearms dealers within the 1,500-foot radius who might fall under the definition of a firearms dealer. The committee understood the point about the trauma that might be caused by seeing gun advertisements from the classroom, but thought a different statement about firearm advertising might be more impactful than increasing the radius for firearms dealers.
I wish I knew how many.
How it actually happens.
Right.
Right, like who's
Must
really
be
getting
one in
impacted by
Mundelein.
this?
Yeah,
I'm just gonna put it out there.
well, I
One,
would not agree with their thing.
I'm about right.
Yeah,
I'm with you.
I'm tempted to say not adopt too, even though I was understanding it. I mean, I think they're obviously with anything like this.
I'm saying
Sorry.
I don't agree with their not adopt.
Right. That's what I
Meaning
meant.
I
I'm
would say
sorry.
Adopt. I would
Yes.
go for
To
it.
to having 15,000 feet. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I know that's what, I'm sorry, I know that's what you meant. I said it wrong, my response. But what I meant to say that I was thinking is, I understand that they're being concerned about people who are already there, like grandfathered in a sense, but I don't know how that would really affect them. So I guess the argument doesn't really hold up to me too much for their reason to not adopt, is really what I was saying.
Yeah. No.
That's my thought.
So is this the case then, that if less than 50% of the people, that won't come up anyway?
It won't matter anyway, but
Could be,
at
no.
least we can.
Right, but you
We
can go
can
on
be
record
right.
as a district and
right.
state
I would
whether or
agree
not
with that.
you agree with it or not.
So is this board, so for our purposes, is
Right.
saying that they want to adopt it, and then it's the number of you that agree with that?
Julie?
I'm good agreeing.
Agreeing to adopt, agreeing to adopt. Okay, so
To go
adopt.
against
adopt.
the recommendation, yeah.
So five.
I like
five
Jill's like-
to 5 versus 2.
well, you know,
I mean,
I just feel like
didn't
it's very
vote.
far-reaching.
We're
I
voting
really,
now.
into the community. I won't.
Yeah, I'm with the rest.
So is it 6 to 1 or 7? Oh.
I'm gonna say,
Okay.
I'm gonna say not to adopt.
So it's 6 to 1.
Yeah.
Thanks, that's helpful.
Okay, number 4 is the capital grant fund for school buildings. I'm just gonna read this because I was going through this. The resolutions committee heard testimony from submitting districts regarding the capital grant fund for school buildings and school construction grants, continuing appropriation. The two resolutions were similar in scope. So basically, there were two resolutions that were the same that came together regarding this, and it's essentially basically stating like for schools to be able to get grants for construction, that it should be based upon like an equity evidence-based model funding versus, so those schools that are the neediest should be able to receive a grant based upon their need versus just anybody applying for the grant and may not have the greatest need as another district. And it's looking at these factors of the EAV per pupil, that district's borrowing capacity, and again, the evidence-based funding model. So the resolutions committee is recommending that we do adopt this. So again, it's basically saying in order to get a grant through like capital expenditures, it should be based upon like equity in the evidence of need for a district versus the district just putting in a grant and being able to get it.
Yep.
I agree.
Julie?
I agree.
Okay. So we're on to 5, the school safety fund. This, okay, so this here is, with districts being able to tap into, grant funds for school safety based upon, and you know, getting cameras, security personnel, staff training. But this is, again, kind of based upon the need of the evidence-based funding model. So if a district is in need from a financial perspective, more so than others, but also looking at districts who may be kind of rural, that may not have the resources of police close by, that they may need to tap into this more so than others. So this almost gets back to, I mean, I'm not saying this, it's not the same, but like the kind of the gun, where teachers were, again, I'm just trying to show you some linkages that I'm seeing. Where teachers last year, it was a big thing in rural districts, but it was a close vote, Julie, I believe, for teachers to be able to carry or have some kind of a firearm in the classroom. And a lot of the rural districts wanted that more so because they didn't have a quick response from, you know, fire and police and other kinds of teams to get to them quicker than someone in a suburban or city.
I would agree, because I disagreed last time with that. I think it was only because of the equality, you know, like when you look at an equity standpoint for the different schools. So I think this is great.
Well, and it sounds like it's gone through, except for they're adding the words about equity in the process.
I guess, though, I think back to Michael's point, I think you brought up a good point, Michael, though, that if the equity lens that we're looking at is a rural school district.
It's brought up by.
They would
Yeah, I saw that, but I was just wondering, like,
I don't
do
see
you
it
think
as-
like that is, I don't want to say like code for saying we're arming teachers, but I'm kind of curious if that could be interpreted that way. I don't
Oh,
know.
then, yeah.
Well, that's why I didn't understand. I just don't know. It doesn't feel very clear.
Again, I think
me.
it's all gone through, except they're just adding equity into the wording.
So you're just saying that, no, I think it's
The way
it's
I
amended
read,
existing position. So there was a school safety fund, but there's a lot of new copy.
well, it's like, I think
This is the same,
No,
this
I don't
isn't
think
the
this is the
same
same
one.
one.
That was really specific last year.
Yeah.
This
Yeah,
is,
last year it was a whole separate
Okay.
amendment. I don't remember hardly any of these amending existing positions last year.
No, this,
I think they were all new, but I could be wrong there.
I'm looking at this, though, as it allows, like, it's a grant,
yeah, to just-
allowing schools to have
Sure.
that where they may not have that, similar to what we just talked about from the equity standpoint. And I think what, Michael, you were saying is, you know, like, when you're looking at what we had last time to the equality aspect of it, of, you know, wanting from a rural area to here, they have different needs.
Right.
And this may equalize it.
And give those schools that have.
Correct.
Okay.
And
Not
it
as
might
good
give
of
them
resources.
the resources to equalize it.
Right.
to see-
Right,
I
yeah,
think
but
that's
I'm
the
not saying it's the
intent.
same thing, I'm just
Right.
saying that there was like some similar,
Yeah.
Right.
There's
That's what that
similar
maybe was
vibe, yeah.
trying to achieve, and this is maybe a better way of achieving it.
I think what you're saying, Carrie, is it's that very first paragraph where it says to support all costs of a comprehensive school security enhancements, including but not limited to. So what do all costs
Yeah, I think
include are,
Feels a little broad, right? You think, Jill, is that what you mean?
well, I'm understanding where we don't want to open up a loophole to that, but I think that's small compared to all the rest of this language here. And I'm looking at the districts that it's coming from.
Well, right, but so,
I don't know if these position statements are binding. I think it's more for one coming up, that I had that question on, but I mean, if you read the words, it's saying the IASC will advocate for these things, and
Right.
it included federal in addition to state, and then I think they're just clarifying that, we're gonna pay particular attention to, or make, make it very clear that when there's grant money, you're gonna get priority based on geography and
Sure.
and your funding and your need, which seems like it's coming from a place of equity.
Yeah.
I guess, I guess I understand that, especially because, I mean, do we currently get grants, Brian, for our training, our staff training and stuff for,
School safety? I don't think we have specific grants related to that. I'm just trying to think off the top of my head.
I just was thinking if we ever wanted to participate in that, but.
No.
Okay.
I mean, we host, when we've updated our procedures, we just.
But I think when you then come down to the district rationale for this, is that some districts can pay for that, some cannot, at the sacrificing of the educational programs to keep a child safe.
I read it as that, as we can afford a lot of we can do camera upgrades, and we can, and there are probably schools statewide that can't do that.
Right, that's fair. Okay. All right. I get that.
We're not a tier 1 or tier 2 school, right?
Fair.
Deal.
That sounds good.
Agree.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
so the recommendation is do or die.
Thanks for letting me work that out. I had to work it out, you guys, so I appreciate that. Thank you.
So is it a yes?
Yes, it is.
7-0.
It says do or die.
Says to do adopt, yeah.
Do adopt.
Yep.
7-0.
7-0, sorry.
7-0, yes.
The next is the Mandates Review Committee. I had to look at this a number of times.
Did we do number 6?
Yeah, we're doing 6 now.
Number 6.
Oh, did we skip? Oh, I'm sorry.
Involvement with candidates for public.
Okay, going back to number 6.
Visiting this one.
Involvement with candidates for public office. This is coming from Indian Prairie School District 204, Naperville, I believe.
Yes, Naperville.
So here, it's just identifying,
Involved in politics.
it's
supposed to
be about nonpartisan, but then there's something at the end, or number 8, that we get into as well. But here it's legislative candidates relative to public education to support those candidates who have demonstrated understanding and support. But they strike that out.
Right.
Right.
And so,
They're recommending not
No
to.
business getting involved.
yeah, they're recommending not to adopt this.
I agree.
Right.
To keep the current language.
Because this amendment is based on principles of nonpartisanship by supporting analysis of legislative positions rather than individual candidates. So
I think we should change
recommendations
it was
do
like
not
we get
adopt.
involved with it. Leaning your way, but we just don't want to
I'm
go
good
there
with
at all.
that.
I'm good with that.
Agree.
Yeah.
I couldn't
Yes.
quite figure this. My notes say nature of change isn't clear to me.
Right,
It was
that's why I
kind of
was
written
like,
really badly too, and then crossed out, but I agree with the resolution committee on this. Everyone else does?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, 7-0. Marilyn, thank you.
Okay, now to Mandates Review Committee.
I didn't care. I didn't understand.
Again, I didn't, this one is
Well-
not clear to me, so.
I felt like Scott was probably putting it in action tonight, wasn't he, when he was talking about like curriculum mandates and things like that? Is that what they mean?
Oh, okay, so I think this is basically saying that when you do have a mandate of some sort, that you should legislate to always have some kind of conclusionary period, like when it's going to end, so that you can be able to review and go back and make checks to see if it is working or not, versus just have it in place and not have a time period. You can always probably renew or something, or change, extend out, but that you should have, at least when you're putting in mandates, you should always have some kind of a end date, at least initially.
Yep.
Yeah, I said
Right,
yes.
describes that the best. The group would provide a comprehensive view.
Yeah. Julie agreed too?
Yes.
Jill? Okay.
Oh,
Jills and Jills?
well,
Two Jills?
wait, so the resolution committee, they were recommending to adopt it.
Yeah. Yeah. So 7-0, Marilyn. Thanks.
Okay, and then number 8, the final one, is the financial contribution for school board elections. So this again is coming from Indian Prairie School District 204. The IASB strongly believes that the school board candidates should not solicit, accept, or receive either a donation or financial contribution from special interest groups, political action committees, or political parties. And so this resolution is basically outlining that the committees agreed to add like partisanship to the title, and to add a section regarding school board candidates not accept contributions from partisan groups. And so the resolutions committee is recommending that you do adopt this.
Great.
My question here is, this is where I'm curious if position statements are non-binding. I mean, I read the language and it just says, IASB strongly believes, but if there's a candidate who wants to go out and get, $1 million backing from some political party or PAC or PAC, nothing's to stop the person, right? These are just position statements that, how it reads is non-binding. I mean, so it's language, but it's non-enforceable.
Right,
Well,
how would they
Correct.
enforce
They
it?
can't.
Yeah, so I think this is so again, if we go back to, this is what we're recommending, or as a group, as a body, to the IASB to legislate, for them to go to the legislator to legislate.
Yeah.
So right now, there wouldn't be any, I believe, I'm speculating, consequences.
Right.
It would only be if the overall body votes for that, and then the IASB is successful in having their, lobbying or whatever they're doing to get the legislator to agree to do so.
But unlike other position statements that mention supporting legislation, this one doesn't. That was my only thought. So I feel like it's a nice to have, and it's an enhancement. If school board members are, I think by law, by definition, at least in Illinois, not affiliate with any party. Like when you fill out the forms to run, you can't choose any political party. It's nonpartisan. So it just seems like it's furthering that effort, but I just don't think it's enforceable.
Right.
I feel like it's a nice to have and it's good words, but it's not terribly effective. Unless I misunderstand what
No,
the
that sounds
outcomes
right.
are, but.
That sounds right, Julie, and then I think to Michael's point, though, if they decide that if there's enough support behind this, that they want to put people in, to go knock on doors in Springfield and get legislation to change it, it could be an enforceable law down the road. But as of right now, no, it won't be. I would agree to adopt it.
Agree.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Okay. Yep. 7-0.
So what do we do with these do not present? Because they're not going to present them then. We don't really need to get involved in.
Yep.
We don't have to look at these. Put it down. Put it down. You read enough
So,
this weekend. You don't have to do anymore. No more reading.
We're correct that those do not present and I was on the webinar, but they did say that those would not be presented at all. These do not present. There's going to be a consent agenda. I don't know what the consent agenda is at the moment. They said that that would be sent to us like a couple of days beforehand. And that consent agenda will have some amendments or things, but you really can just only say yes or no.
You'll review that and.
Right, if there's something earth-shaking.
Yeah, I think from what I recall, and again, my memory is a little fuzzy from last year, but of the 8 things that we just discussed, 5 of them had yes recommendations from the resolutions committee, so the consent agenda at most would have those 5 things on it. And if so, there's 1 vote, and boom, it's done. And then the 3 no's don't come up for a vote unless they're petitioned by the group that presented them. So there could literally just be the 1 vote. Now, I think if there's anything within those 5 yeses that they think might, be worthy of discussion, or that and people can vote, just like in our meetings, people can request that things come off the consent agenda. But it might be a really good meeting for Michael.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, that's what they anticipate. It may be quick.
You guys feel good about this? Okay? Everybody's good? All right, any other questions?
No.
Okay, should we wrap things up?
Yes.
Is there a motion to adjourn, please?
So moved.
Second. Okay, everyone, all in favor? Aye. Have a good night.
All right, thank you, everybody.
Bye, Julie. Have a great week.
Bye, Julie.
Bye, Julie.